Tension on deck.
Hey, good evening, good afternoon, Ron. How's everything? How you doing today?
Doing good. Doing good. Gonna get one good day of weather here tomorrow, and then it's gonna be 40 again.
Oh, yeah, it's hard with the 80 degrees every day down here. It's
Oh,
terrible.
it's a rough life, right? So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to Hassan. Getting in there nice and early. 516 diecast. Throwing out $1.99 already. Appreciate you, brother. Detective Nolan, Matty O'Brien. Terry Manane, how are you, sir? How's everything? Lily's with us as always. Sleepy Joe. Marty V. All right. Looks like we're getting a good start to the show. Yeah, so something that we've had discussions about in the past. We were talking about this just a couple minutes ago. But just keeps it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? I mean, when Mamdani was elected, we were all curious to see what the relationship was going to be like with the NYPD because of a lot of prior statements. We're going to bring a few of them up a little bit later. The fact that he's just Democratic Socialist, doesn't seem to be supportive of the police, and then since he's been in office for the past close to 3 months, uh, he hasn't disappointed. I don't think in what the expectations were, which is unfortunate. We were hoping for something a little bit better with the relationship with the police department, and you know, again, like we talked about, I wasn't surprised when he cut, you know, Eric Adams 5,000 additional officers from the budget. We knew that was coming. He said that while he was campaigning. But as far as working with the police department and his police department, not so much. Not so much. So there was a New York Post article that came out. And it says experienced NYPD cops see little incentive to stay in the department if Mamdani cuts the overtime. So it's not an untrue statement. We're going to get into a little bit and explain to those who aren't that familiar with what's going on why that's the case. But we're also going to get into other reasons why people continue to leave, because this has been going on for the entire Eric Adams administration, and basically since almost since 2020, since the summer of love, right? So when you saw this article, were you surprised?
No, I mean, we kind of anticipated it, right? When I think we had done a couple shows back in November and stuff after the election, kind of anticipated things like this were going to happen. We also see that almost every mayor, claims to come in and is going to cut the overtime. And in the past, the overtime has dried up a little bit, and then the overtime goes back because the job relies on that overtime, right? It's built into the budget. It's expected. When we used to do the variance reports, right, you had different types of overtime. You had operational overtime. You had court appearances. So it's kind of like built into your budget. But what scares me the most now, although the overtime cuts is not new and it shouldn't have been new to the Post, what's new is I think that it's going to continue. So when they used to say the wave sometimes comes in and then the wave goes out, I think it's coming in and it's going to be cut. And he's looking, and this is his way to defund. I just think that he knows what he's doing. He knows by cutting these certain things, it's going to force people to go and leave, and is going to bring new and inexperienced officers in, which is going to be even more problematic.
Yeah,
So,
we'll talk about that a little bit too. But it, yeah, it's always been cyclical, right? Overtime has always been cyclical. I've spoken about this. I had a lieutenant who was like when overtime got cut, he like freaked out a little bit, and he,
Mhm.
I got to retire. I got to retire. You're not giving me my life money because his overtime got cut. I'm like, I can't give you overtime that everybody else doesn't get because you want to you know pad your pension for lack of better terms. But what was the cap is no longer the cap. Now the cap is 20 instead of 35, whatever the case was may be. And so I can't give you extra overtime. I'll give you your cap. That's it. I don't care when you do it. To me, it was always by the quarter. So if the quarter was 105, and you did 30 hours one month and 40 hours the next month, I don't care. You know,
Yeah.
as long as it's 120 by the end of the quarter, because that's when the reports are getting done, right? Pretty much. But
Yeah.
that's when the lists come out. But you know, so it's always been that balance. And but there's always times. And then I said, just hang in there because it's gonna come back. The weather's gonna get warm, crime's gonna go up, and then they're gonna start giving out all this overtime again, all this programmatic overtime that you can go out and do. Because that my guys didn't get you know, all the easy going overtime. They had to put the bag on, they had to go out in the field. Some of it was supervisory overtime where they would go out and scratch because it was a lieutenant, a sergeant, the cops in the office. Uh, but no, you if it was, Operation Impact or whatever you wanted to call it, where they would go out to these high crime areas, that's what they had to do. Uh, but they couldn't do more than anybody else, you know. And I'm like, just it'll come back. He cut ties. He retired. He went down, became a PPO, probationary police officer in Florida. So, like you left, you got your pension, you bought a house. That's great, and now you're starting from scratch again. So, you know, and then what happened? A month or two later, overtime came back, right? And then, fast forward a couple of years, and guys are getting so much overtime that they're leaving because they have zero quality of life. They have zero home life because too much overtime, because guys are leaving. Guys, when I say guys, females and males, members of the service are leaving for whatever reasons, lacking confidence in the upper echelon, uh, work-life balance, home balance, just whatever the reasons are. We're going to get into some of the reasons why I think they're leaving, because I don't think they're all leaving because of the overtime. But yeah, it always goes around. It's cyclical, and it will come back. But like you said here, is this really a wave or is it a tsunami? You know, is is it is this wave drawing way back out into the ocean until things get really bad? Then it's going to come up and swamp the cops like they've done in the past. I don't know. He's got to find money to fund his Department of Community Safety and all these other people that he's putting in charge of, turning New York City into, a socialist state, a socialist city. So whether that's from his taking it a little bit here, a little bit there, but like you said too, it's scary losing people, because part of the article was who is jumping ship, right? Who's eligible? These are people that are eligible to leave. There's thousands of NYPD detectives and bosses with 20 years on the job. So for those who aren't familiar, in case you're not from New York City, you're not NYPD, there's NYPD has a 20-year pension, right? Or tier 3 for those people hired after I had it. I forget what year. They have to do 22 and a half years, right? But right now we're in tier 2 and tier 2A, where it's a 20-year retirement. So those with 20 years could leave tomorrow. And that was the great thing about hitting that threshold, right? If you were just one day from getting pissed off or being annoyed enough that you could say, well, that's it. The job doesn't have the leverage on me anymore. I can just leave if I feel that this isn't for me anymore. Right. But if you go down the line, you look at this, and I don't really count captains, even though it's 66% of the captains can retire. Overtime doesn't really affect them. Can they get cash overtime? Yes, but it's a percentage. It's not a dollar for dollar. it's quarterly, and really, it's tough to formulate that because you're also putting a lot of time on the books, which then if you're going to try to make it pensionable, it's a mess when it comes to captains and above, right? But you look at the detectives, 23% of the detectives can leave, 42% of the lieutenants can leave. That's a huge number. Almost half of middle management lieutenants can leave, and 22% of the sergeants could leave. Well, what do you think about this graphic that was in the Post article?
Yeah, no, I think you see a lot of the times when captains or lieutenants become captains, they're usually in it for the long haul. And the idea that that's a high number, well, because it usually takes a lot of time as a police officer, a sergeant, lieutenant to attain the rank of captain, right? I think a minimum you could probably have is about 10 years, but sometimes it takes longer depending on when the tests are. So you're going to see captains usually get promoted after the 20 or between the 15 and 20th year, and then they stay because there's always a chance for promotion, to get the deputy inspector, deputy chief, etc. So I could see where that number is a little skewed. Yeah, I mean, what scares me is the number of detectives, right? Because you're talking about investigations, you're talking about people out on the street. That's an important number. And when you see, even though it's only 20, it says 23%, but you're talking about a quarter of the detectives out there. So that becomes problematic. And relative to what you said earlier, with the cap and they lower it, they raise it. The issue guys were pretty diabolical with it, I would say, because they would get operational overtime. So it would be like details, right? They would do the Hercules, the torch, details. They would take that, and then it's just similar to what a cop could do on the street. And I'm not. I'm talking like in the past. I don't know specifically now, but if you got all that operational overtime up front, when you got arrest overtime at the end, you go over the cap, and you there was nothing really to do, right? As a supervisor, I couldn't stop people on a barricaded EDP or a barricaded perpetrator and say, "Oh, what hours you have? You're over the cap. You got to go home." No, you need the personnel where they're working. So there's also ways to do it, but yeah. So the numbers they're big, but they've always been big, right? There's always been a large amount of people that could retire at any given time. That's just the nature of the beast, depending on the size of the classes that went in. You're talking about big class. My class in April of '87 was only 400 people. But I was surrounded by a January class that was over 1,000, and then a July class that was like 800. So when you talk about those classes, and I know, 95, 93, all those were a lot of big classes too. So when you talk about those times where they get up to it, decisions are made whether or not they're going to retire. And personally, I think the decision to retire shouldn't be based on your overtime. It should be a personal decision. Is the time right? And I always say, and people have said this to me before, what's your exit plan? Because if your exit plan is just to retire and not do anything, and you're 42 years old because you did 20 years, you're going to run out of money. You're going to run out of money. I don't care how lucrative your pension is. Through inflation, you're going to end up running out of money. So, always have an exit plan. But yeah, I mean, these numbers are frightening, but and I always think they always have been frightening. But like I said earlier, I just think Mamdani is going to continue the cut. So yeah, it's a very, very complex situation to decide whether or not you want to leave and when you're going to leave. So it puts a lot of people in a different mindset.
Right. And I agree with you. I've always said, you're going to know when it's time to go. Everybody always says you know when it's time to go. You'll just get that feeling and you'll know, all right, it's time to go. I got to go. But I think that was a feeling that we had. That was from a different era, to be perfectly honest. I think that what the cops bosses, all the members of the service are putting up with nowadays is different from when we were on. And we didn't leave 20 years ago. I retired 2 years ago. You retired a little longer than that ago. So we're not that far removed from the job, right? We're not that far removed, but the job has pivoted so much away from the job that we knew, that we came up through, the things that we had to deal with. And everybody has to deal, every generation of cop has to deal with different issues, right? Different community issues, different political issues, different administrative issues, and what the cops are up against today. And, we'll get into that even more a little bit later too, but what the cops are up against today is really, it's daunting to just walk out the door, where we used to be able to walk out the door, go out, do our job, and know that if we didn't intentionally kill somebody, there was a very low probability that we were ever going to be looking at any kind of criminal investigation, let alone, charges and the thought of losing your pension. What did we used to say? When we were cops, right? You literally had to commit a felony to lose your job. It's not the same anymore today. And a lot of times you don't even really have to do a whole lot wrong. I will always talk about the two different types of mistakes, right? The mistake of the mind, the mistake of the heart. You make an intentional mistake of the mind, you should be held more accountable than a mistake of the heart, where you intended to do the right thing and you made the mistake, right? And you should always learn from all mistakes. But nowadays, with all this legislature that's been anti-police, that has made the job tougher and tougher for cops to walk out the door and just do their job, weighs on you. They're ordered overtime, like Marlon was saying before, like I mentioned before, and you mentioned this ordered overtime, where they were just hounding people with this transit overtime and everything else, where guys weren't getting any time to go home. Like they couldn't even go home and shower and take a good sleep. They were staying in the command, and hopefully their command had a decent shower, whatever the case may be. And they're just right back at work because they get stuck for doubles twice a week. It's really bad, and the quality of life is so different now that we hear it all the time, that people used to take this job, right, and maybe would leave in 20 years, and now they're taking this job as a stepping stone, like until a better offer comes up, until I get some tenure and experience, and then I can go down south or out west to a police department that appreciates the police, pays decent, commensurate to the living costs, and I don't have to deal with all this bullshit politics and everything else that they're up against. So I do think that those that are eligible are putting up with a lot more than we put up with. So their time to go clock internally is it's like a beating heart, man. It's like, I'm getting close. I can get out of here soon. It's getting close. I can get out of here soon. I really feel that. And it's sad to say that, because it's a job that I love, a job that I loved and was passionate about and didn't want to leave. I left because I couldn't perform my job anymore. So I retired. But I just think that looking at the numbers now is a big factor. It's more of a factor than it used to be, because when you were forced to do all this overtime in 2025, and now you're looking at the possibility of losing all that overtime, it's no longer, 2025 is no longer going to be pensionable, because we were also tier 2. So tier 2, for those who don't know the difference, with tier 2, we could use our last 12 months or the best 3 years we ever had, whatever the highest number was, to average out our pension. In tier 2, that's not the case anymore. They get the last 12 months. That's it. I know
Yeah,
I
well, I
rambled
think you
on.
bring up a good point too about the family life, right? So years ago, we talked about the 9 squad chart and how detrimental that was to your health, to your family life, and the job changed it. They changed to steady tours, first, second, and third platoon. And now the quality of life is diminished again because of the excessive amount of overtime, the fact that officers can't go home. That has a amazing effect on your body. It has an amazing effect on your home life, right? So when your spouse, significant other is home by themselves and you're at work, things are happening. If you have a family where both parents work, an extreme burden on where the children have to go. Who's going to watch them? If you don't have support from an extended family, so all of these factors definitely attribute to the officer's decision to to retire. So the fact that some of the overtime is being cut is can be perceived as beneficial to the officers because they're not stuck with it. If you completely dry it up, then you have to be careful because there's officers that have gotten used to it. You can remember the officers that got the really nice apartments, are driving the BMWs to work, and you're like, oh man, how well, I work a lot of overtime and I do this, and my this is my mortgage, and I can afford this house because I make this much overtime. Well, now you've actually decided to you know, rely on the overtime, which again isn't a thing to do. You should always, in my opinion, if you're a police officer and you're working overtime, put that money away. Either put the money away or invest it into the 457 or some other IRA, even a 401 Roth, etc. Because that's money that you could use down the road. Don't use your money and spend it wisely. And then when you retire, you can spend it any way you want. But I know some people don't do that. They want to live life, that day, and they want to live happy or whatever. So I mean that's up to you. But the thing is you can't depend on the overtime. And now when you start pulling the carpet out from guys that are depending on it and realize that it's part of their pension and they can retire, and they look at the numbers and they say, you know what, if I retire, I'm still going to make this much because of whatever my overtime and this, and now lessens my tax burden with the state taxes in some of the particular states. So you take all of that into effect and you decide, hey, I got to get out because I'm going to lose money. And absolutely 100% what you just said. When you have the capability of saying, okay, my average of these 3 years, I have them. I already locked them in. So those are good 3 years. If I make less, I remember every promotion I got, I made less money because I was making overtime, top pay. I was making money, and and then the next thing you know, you're like, what? Look at the paycheck. And you're like, oh my god. But so you have to, yeah, it's a tough decision. So yeah, but I think Madami's doing this specifically to get rid of the older guys, to get rid of those people, and move on. And through attrition, he actually defunds the police, which we've seen done before. You know.
Yeah, because I mean, Nin, Nin's always got some interesting comments. We'll leave it at that. But he's saying how we're not even mentioning that the increase in the cost of living in the last 20 years. That's not true. We are saying that. And someone else in the chat also mentioned that the days of selling your house high here in New York and then moving down to another state and buying low, those days aren't as prevalent either. Where the cost of living around the country has increased. It's not just here in New York that's increased, and now you're going to go down to Florida, North Carolina, or somewhere and buy a McMansion for half the money of what you sold your house for here, and then you have a nice little cushion on top of your pension to sit with. That's not the case either. So finances is a big reason why people are making a decision to leave, because they can leave. But when they're looking at these finances, because I believe they have to look at that because they're being forced to look at it because they're not as comfortable in the position anymore. When it's not, and uh, you come into work every day and you're up against so many obstacles. It's very difficult to come to work every day. Uh, listen, there's always going to be pressure. There's always going to be, it's a high pressure job. It's always been a high pressure job. That's why we have the heart bill, right? It's the pay parity has improved dramatically over the years since when we were cops. And so things have gotten better there, but people have to look. And, Steve Weiss, good friend of the podcast, he came on, go back and check out his episode. Long term, no department offers benefits like the NYPD does. That is true. Retirement outside of New York City is horrible. Health benefits are horrible. If cops get hurt, they basically cut loose no 3/4. So, yes, I understand that. But when you leave, and we're talking about people that are leaving because they have their 20 years on. So they're leaving with a pension. They're leaving with city benefits. And the city benefits did change where they're accepted a little bit wider because they changed just from flat out GHI to US Healthcare, right? So
United Healthcare, yep.
United Healthcare, thank you. United Healthcare. So I don't know. I'm still in New York, so I don't know, but I've heard that.
It's 1,000 times better. I can tell you that right now because
I
everybody takes it.
My daughter broke her leg in Texas, and I paid out of pocket for a lot of stuff because the GHI was local, right?
Right.
But so listen, finances are a big thing, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it. And I see that. I have a new friend, Rel 330 I7F, who says I've nobody wants to work for me, that I ruined Queens North Task Force. Okay. It was a DWI task force. I was sent there to change the way we operated. So sorry you feel that way. But anyway, so yeah, but now, the unions came out, they made comments. You have the Detectives Endowment Association. If they have big overtime, they got to go. And he said the perceived lack of mayoral support and public anti-cop sentiment that it creates is also pushing cops to leave. So just what we just said, right? What's happening is people are getting in our police officers' faces. They're harassing them out in the streets. So these are things that people are putting up with that we didn't have to put up with when we were cops, right? So, what do you think about the union's position?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about internal and external problems. And to me, the unions are an internal problem because they don't do anything to support their members. They don't go and talk to the upper echelons and say this is wrong or that's wrong. They don't have those, what I would consider political rallies to do things. What they do is they collect your dues. They give money to the candidate that they think is going to best fit the board members and not maybe the members in the union. And I just think they should step up more. And who knows what they do behind closed doors? Maybe some of the stuff I said that I just spoke about, maybe they do behind closed doors, but they should be more vocal about it and tell you what they're doing. Because it just seems to me like when you see, and I'm not saying that, Scott's son shouldn't have got promoted, but when you see things like that getting promoted, you're like, all right, well, who are they actually working for? Are they working for themselves? Are they making sure that their kids and their family members and their friends get taken care of? Or are they working for the poor guy in the 7-5 squad and the 4-4 squad that are busting their ass every day, trying to close cases out, doing a lot of work and not getting any reward for it. And when they do get reward, it's way after everybody else that didn't deserve it gets it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough thing. So the unions, in my opinion, either should step up. And if they are stepping up, then they need to be more verbal about it, and they need to be more informative to their memberships, and show them that they're doing that. Because what I see is that they're not doing much. You don't hear from them at all. So
they're more, yeah, they're more of like, you know, benevolence associations, like you said, like the patrolmen's a benevolent association is their union, right? The sergeant's benevolent, lieutenant's benevolent, the captain's endowment association, right? I mean, they're there to fight, but you haven't seen them be very vocal. And we talked about it on the network, how all the unions got together and endorsed Eric Adams after multiple scandals, and then a recent scandal, like 3 days after a recent scandal, right? It's crazy. So
yeah, that's a great point what Reed brings up. I mean, you think about that, right? How they control who gets into that position. I remember when I was a cop, right? I was a brand new cop, and the board came in, and they all gave out the cards, right? So you're like, oh wow, I got the cards and everything else. And then the election was coming up, and they're like, well, you got to vote for me because I'm giving you the cards and stuff. And you're like, all right, you gave me the cards. You didn't know any better, right? But that's what you voted for. And the next thing you know, you're putting in guys that you don't know. And then when other guys tried to run because they didn't like what the delegate was doing or what he was saying, then the unions came in and said, no, you got to endorse this guy and stuff. I agree 100%. That's what they need. What Reed is saying right there, that's what they need. They need to be able to, anybody should be able to run. If you're in that rank, you should be able to run. You shouldn't have to be a delegate. Okay, run. And then you'll see changes. You'll see guys will start acting a little more appropriate as union, members and delegates. I was a union delegate when I worked for the cable company in the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So I was a union delegate. I knew what I had to do and how, and I knew what side management took, because you're probably would be considered a negotiator, right? You got to make sure that what management's going to want. They're going to want, they want to take a bite out of your ass, and you got to protect your membership. So you have to come to that, middle ground, or sometimes you have to take a hard stance and tell them you're not taking it. But the point being is, if you don't have guys in there that are, boots on the ground, that know what's going on, then the union stinks. Not guys in suits that go around and bring, the canteen, and you think everything's great, and then after that they forget who the hell you are. So I totally agree.
Yeah, and also, evening, Tommy. Welcome to the show. Also, I don't understand why the unions have one retiree rep. Why couldn't a retiree be the head of a union?
Yeah.
They have the experience, they have the time, they have the knowledge, and they're not beholden to anybody.
Nobody, no.
Right? As a retiree. So, all right. So, what does Tish have to say about it? Right? That last year was the largest hiring year on record, more than 4,000 officers last year. Now, I don't know about on record, because, like you said, during Safe Streets, my class was 3,200, and then 6 months later there was another 3,000. So, I don't know about on record. Maybe in recent history, 4,000 new officers, but there was also 3,415 people left the job. Right? So the
who's doing the math there?
Yeah, do the math, right? So we not only outpaced the attrition in 2025, which is not just retirees, because that's what they base their attrition rate on, is retirees, right? But a lot of people are still retiring early, vesting out, or resigning, just outright quitting, because they don't have enough time to be vested. So, and we're not in a hiring crisis anymore. we ended the 2025 at the head count just shy of 35,000, which is the authorized head count. But again, we look at who are we losing? Who are we losing as opposed to who we are getting? First of all, standards have been lowered. The background investigations have been shortened. We've discussed this ad nauseum across the platform. They're hiring people with incomplete background investigations, and it's turning into problems. And it's been problematic for certain officers that have been arrested, finding out that they're wanted for crimes that they committed. It's pretty bad. So also they hired 4,000, and when I was in candidate assessment, we tracked it. An average of 10 to 15% of the hired class doesn't make it through the academy. They retire, they resign before the end of the academy. So yeah, you brought on 4,000 officers and hired 4,000 officers. How many of those 4,000 did 400 leave? You know, I don't know. And also, we're replacing people with 20 years in rank, right? 20 years on the job that are in either rank or senior police officers, because they don't give the police officer number here because the job is so young. So it probably is an embarrassing amount of people that have over 20 years now. And that's, I don't know why that wasn't put up here in this graphic, right? But the job, I think the last time we took a look, right, 55% of the job had less than 8 years on the job. You know, that was never the case. The job is so young nowadays, you're losing the seniority, you're losing the experience. And that's the whole thing that is problematic, you know, is that you're not just losing numbers. Yeah, you hired 4,000 officers. Those 4,000 officers have to go through 6 months of the police academy, 6 months of field training. So those officers hired in 2025 are not going to be eligible for even start patrol until 2026, you know, 627, depending on when they're really going to be available to increase that staffing in the commands, because it's 6 months, then they get out the academy. And then they use the numbers. Oh, well, we gave 20 cops to the 115 precinct. We gave 30 cops to the 109. We gave 10 cops to the 100th precinct. We gave 14 cops to the 40. We gave 15 cops to the 43, whatever the case may be. Okay, but those cops can't do patrol. They're not allowed to do patrol. They're not allowed to backfill patrol. So their head count is a false head count as well, because they have to go through their field training before they get their assignments to go out and cover patrol. And they can only do certain details as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not going to put, these young rookies, thereafter with, you have to put them with the senior guys, right? Because you don't want to put two rookies in a car together, because that could be detrimental to them.
Technically, you're not even allowed to anymore. They put out a department memorandum that you couldn't have two cops with less than 2 years in the car together.
Right. And you remember there was a couple cops that were killed that were young cops too. So, I mean, that being said, you're right. It takes a long time to get these people, the police officers, out on the streets and doing any service. You had a recent city council, right? All the council members were all begging when Tish was telling these numbers. People were all begging, like, well, I need more cops in my precinct. I need more cops here, because they don't see it also. And I think another problem that I think has come to light, and I think this was what happened under O'Neill, was the restructuring of the sectors and the response cars and all that semantics, that, you stretched out the sectors so big that you might not see a police officer. I remember when I was in the 4-1 and I had Sexter Eddie, which was the lower end of Southern Boulevard. when it was slow, we would be circling around and around. You'd go up and down a block a few times. If you go Avenue St. John's, you go up to Tiffany, you'd cruise around quite a few times. So people would see you out there all the time. They'd see the car. And that's that omnipresence that we talk about, right? The perception, the idea that there's a lot of police out there because I see the cops all the time. Here, you don't see that. You make a sector so freaking big. 4 sectors in the 4-1 is ludicrous when there used to be 6 or 7. So, I mean, I think that's another problem. And I don't even know if there's still response cars. Response cars even still respond. I think that whole concept is ridiculous. It needs to be restructured. And I think they need to get back to the old ways where they have sector and sector responsibility, right? If you remember when you were in a sector, nobody was taking another job for Sector Eddie when I was in Sector Eddie.
No,
I could be on a job and I says, no, Central will respond afterwards. You had sector integrity. You made sure and you knew your sector. So now I just think the whole concept is ridiculous. And yeah, to get those cops from, first of all, in the academy, it builds a base. Are you ready for the streets? Absolutely not. When you get out to field training, you almost forget everything that they just taught you in the police academy, and you got to build on what you learned, right? And then if you get a good field training officer, then you move on. Because that and then it's when you talked about the senior guys. That's what you want. You want that smart senior field training officer who's going to show you the ropes, show you how to do things, because that's how you learn. When you talk about a field training officer that has just came out the class before because they can't get anybody to do it, what are they teaching you? And that is a big and very problematic for the job going forward. And if you're a citizen in New York, if you're in the upper echelons of the police department, you need to reevaluate that to make sure that the training. And I always said this years ago: there should be a reward, a good reward, for the guys to stay on the job. I mean, we talked about corporal rank and everything else, and like Tom Joyce had on last night, the chief of detectives from LAPD, great interview. We talk about rank structure and corporals, and even I think the detective 3 was allowed to supervise detective 1 and detective 2.
Right.
So
this is reversed from ours.
In ours, right? So that's why
1 is actually
the first right.
level.
First level, second, third, and third can supervise the other lower levels. But corporal and things like that. So you need to give us a sense of, like, I always think of Pete Fagosky, God rest his soul, a guy that did 20 years on the streets of the 7-5. Unfortunately, lost his life doing as such, but he did that for his family. He did that for his his children, and he should have been rewarded while he was doing that, because somebody that stays on patrol, hey, great. I agree. It's a boss's job. It's always been a boss's job. They'll tell you that. Every boss will tell you that. It gets totally different, right? But what I'm telling you is, if you're not going to take a promotional exam, which I suggest, and like Eric and John has suggested, that everybody should. I don't care whether it's the first time, second time, third time, you should take it. But if you're not, I think there should be some sort of reward for the poor cop that is on patrol every day doing the hard work. Same thing as for the detectives, the guys that are out there doing the hard, guys and girls that are out there doing the hard work. And by cutting this overtime, by telling people you're not going to get anything, and looking at the attrition and saying, well, we backfilled. Yeah, great. You think, well, the numbers look skewed anyway, the way you played the game. But you're not getting the quality, and you're losing people with good quality, and people that know the job, and the people that can share and teach the job. That's the problem, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So
it's you're losing all the talent, and we look at the reasons, and this article basically talks about the financial reasons, right? But there's so much more to it. Like I said, I think there's so many other factors that lead up to you making you look at the finances and say, can I financially retire? That's the thing. That's where I think it's flipped on its end compared to when we were on the job and we said, is it time to go? You know, we weren't worried as much about the bottom dollar because it didn't really change, because you were able to maintain whatever level you were maintaining. I mean, for us, it was different with executives, but, you know, as far as the rank and file, you were able to, because the overtime, you know, like we said, was cyclical, you were able to pretty much maintain or go a little bit above, because we know the rule is you're pensionable, you can't go more than 20% above the year before. Anything above 20% from the year before is not pensionable, right? So, but you knew how you could layer it, and you know, you were planning ahead. I'm going to do this much this year. I'm going to do this much next year. I'm going to do this much the year after. I'm going to stay till I'm 20 till 25. I'm going to stay till 27 because the numbers are going to be right, and I can sit back and I don't have to worry about a second career. I can enjoy life. I can live off of this. You know, I put my time in. And now I think because of a lot of external factors and internal factors, a lot of internal factors in the NYPD as well. You know, when you look at the last few administrations and the corruption and the nepotism and the cronyism and the wrong people in the wrong positions, therefore making the job that much more difficult, and not rewarding, like you just laid out, not rewarding the right people with discretionary promotions, and putting the right people in the gigs, right? In those specialized units, in those positions that are long sought for, that people work hard to achieve the opportunity to go to those units. And then all of a sudden, cronyism and nepotism is all that matters. All of these things weigh on people now, where it didn't weigh on us. Listen, it was a thought, it happened, but it was the exception, not the rule, right? Even with discretionary promotions in the upper ranks, it was more of an exception than a rule. That you look at the orders every time when the promotions come down and you go, wow, that person got promoted. Now it's, oh, that person got promoted. Like you're excited to see somebody that deserves it on the sheet, as opposed to looking at the sheet and going, yeah. Oh, and you see this one person, you're like, where did this come from? Who do they know? Because they don't deserve it. That's the way it was when we were coming up. You know, it was the exception and not the rule, and it's become the rule. And so when you're up against those rules internally, the external rules that we talked about with all the changes, you know, in bail reform and the diaphragm law and qualified immunity being yanked out from under you and all this other stuff, cops are not walking out the door with the only thought of how can I come back safe at the end of the day anymore. Now it's how can I come back with my pension? How could I be able to maintain my family, support my family by going out the door every day? And so that once the eligibility, because a lot of times cops think they can't do other things. And John and Eric talk about this all the time. A lot of times cops stay on the job because they think they can't do anything else. And that's not the case. If you apply yourself, you can do a lot of things. You know, we become civil servants for different reasons, right? But a lot of people think that they can't do anything else. So they stick with it and they're miserable, right? But now once their misery reaches that point where they can hit that release valve at 20 years, now you have an option to stay. Can I better my life? Can I find something more comfortable? How much is my life going to improve after I leave if I stay? Because your pension increases, because now you don't have to contribute to the pension. Anything you contribute to the pension is an overage. You get the 1/60th additional. So your pension does increase every year you stay on. But I think now, you know, because John and Eric talk about it all the time too, you know, people don't leave because of the money. And I'll agree with that to a point, because I think now they start thinking more about the money because of all the other factors that are laid on them. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. And those are all the factors that, you know, people have to look at, you know, and I know in the chat, I'm watching Detective Nolan and Reed going back and forth about right there. You have one of it up, the special assignment. I think that would have been a great idea. And you know what? You could have. I understand. Like I think it was Phil Caruso. It was also you know Pat. They didn't want it, right? Because they felt it was unfair. But you could put a time on it also. Let's say if a guy does 20 years as a police officer or does 15 years, he can get SA, and then so forth and so on. And then it would be a good reward, for the police officers, instead of having to fight for that detective shield and drumming down the detective rank. I always, and I could see where Scott would want, head of the DEA, where he would want, no, I agree with it. Have them become detectives, because then he gets more dues, right? So literally, the PBA loses the dues that they would have gotten if those members had gotten SA. I mean, you think about all the guys in ESU that, rightfully so, have gotten detective. Originally third grade, and then there's also a couple second graders and first graders. But that whole specialist shield could have been police officer special assignment, and you could have done different levels of that as well. And then I've said it before. My biggest bone of contention is when a poor police officer gets killed in a line of duty, they promote them to detective first grade. And when you walk into 1PP and you look up on that memorial board and you pay homage to all those police officers that gave their life in the line of duty, it says detective, 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 which is not the case. Not the case. These were poor police officers out on the street doing the job that got murdered. So I mean, that's where I have problematic with it. But I think that you do have to, like you just said, you do have to take into consideration all the factors now. What's going to happen, and plan your retirement out. So and do I think that it's a right decision to jump ship right away? I think you need to evaluate things, because don't forget somebody mentioned it earlier on in the chat, and I'm sorry, I apologize for not writing down who wrote it, but the summer's coming and things could change drastically. We had a really cold January, and like John would say, police officer Jack Frost did a great job in reducing crime. And, Officer Rain is another one that does a great job reducing crime. But eventually, the sun's going to come out, and everybody else is going to come out, and you're going to see a rise in crime, as we have always experienced. Demonstrations are going to be problematic again. So you're going to see things that happen, and you might not be able to police it without giving overtime. So, I mean, yeah, you have to, it's a gamble, because you have this mayor and you don't know what he's actually going to do, and if he's going to cut everything and just let the city go to shit. But you have to take all those things that you had just spoken about into consideration, right? The 160th, what you're doing, etc. So it's a very complex situation. It shouldn't be done haphazardly. Don't look at the numbers and say, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose this, I'm going to lose that." Write it down on a piece of paper, and like you and I both said earlier, have that exit plan, right? What are you going to do? I remember there was a guy, Joe Alessio. He was a funny guy. He was a police officer in the 4-1, and he would always say, hey, if I get, he was Italian, so I'm going to do a little Italian accent. He go, hey, if I get fired, I don't give a crap, because I can still hammer a nail into the wall, so I'll get another job. And that I thought that was a pretty cool attitude. Like, you don't want to get fired, you don't want anything to happen, but and if he did retire, there's other things out there, like you said. We all think in our heads, I can only be a cop, I can only be a cop, I can only do this. No, you're the experience that you get in within the NYPD, the LAPD, Chicago PD, Miami, all these big cities, and even the small cities, and, help you everywhere else. The law enforcement is a great tool to teach you how to deal with people, especially on their worst day, how to de-escalate things, on how to go out there and show really who you are, how you can control scenes, and how you act when the world is chaotic, and how you can act calm and resourceful. So you have a great resource, you have a great career as a police officer, but it's not an end all.
Listen, there's so many reasons, that people consider what I miss.
No, Tank says that's not Italian. I didn't do it right.
Oh, it's coming from the
Hey.
Irishman. We get Pete Facelli on here. Get Pete Facelli on here talk about the Italian.
Hey, exactly.
This Tommy Joyce character. Let's go say hello to Moxie and Maisie for me, will you?
That's it. I'll buy the next round, Tommy.
Great show on the tavern last night, Tommy, by the way, as usual. But yeah, there's so many different things, right? And one of the big things that we touched on briefly is the leadership, right? And when you don't have that confidence in the leadership, that the leadership has your back, that the leadership is going to be there for you, that the leadership has your best interests at heart to accomplish the mission. Don't listen, it's not all about you. It's about helping you, giving you the tools and the support to accomplish the mission to keep the public safe and the quality of life good. But when the mission is not clear, it makes life harder to come to work to do your job, because what's the mission? People aren't getting a clear mission statement from the executive core of the police department, from City Hall. When again, we talked in the very beginning about, the apprehension that people had with Mamdani coming in. And why is that? There was some very radical statements that were made. And you look at 2020, and you look at, we don't need an investigation to know that the NYPD is racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. What we need is to hashtag defund the police. That's what Mamdani said in June of 2020 in response to another user's post that has since been deleted. But you deal with the New York City mayor using budget tricks to keep as many cops as possible on the beat. No to fake cuts, defund the police. So this is what he's thinking about coming in to being a mayor 6 years later. Later that year, all this misery, all for money. In the last budget, City Council tried to make the NYPD reduce its overtime budget by half. They simply refused. There's no negotiating with an institution this wicked and corrupt. Defund it, dismantle it, end the cycle of violence. So he refused for quite a while to walk back these statements that were coming up, right? He refused. So everybody was like, wow, what? But amazingly, he was still voted in. He was still voted in. So this was the anticipation of, hey, what are we going to do? What are we going to get in a Mamdani as a mayor?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, first of all, to call the department racist, I still like to see some examples of that. I know that, Nin in the chat is, talking about it, that it's a racist department. I'm not saying it wasn't racist maybe years ago, but I didn't see racism when I was there. There were first of all, there were a lot of Black and Hispanic officers that I worked closely with, and I was in radio cars with. I don't understand the racism that is spoken about. And anti-queer, we have a whole goal is an organization in the Gay Officers Action League in the police department. I've worked the Gay Pride Parade. I don't see any racism or any discrimination towards the gays lesbians, etc. I don't see any of that. I don't know. Maybe I'm a naive, but I don't
Listen,
see it.
Rob, just look. Every police department is corrupt to nin.
Yeah, I know.
Any
I
police
know.
department, anybody that's trying to keep public order and keep people safe is corrupt, is racist, because we lock up people that commit crimes, and statistically, in neighborhoods of color, more people are arrested of color. So it must be racist. You know,
Yeah.
when people throw out those statistics of who's locked up, right? It's like the 20-second video that we watch on the internet, right? You watch these YouTube shorts, you watch these TikTok shorts, you watch these hits that come up and on X and everything else, and you see a 20-second
Mm.
out of context hit, right? That's all you see. Then all of a sudden, the full video comes out. I'll take the video. I'll give an example of the video of, I forget his name, but the guy who played Jack Reacher, right? Is that the Reacher? That he's riding his motorcycle with his kids, and a guy jumps out in front of his motorcycle, and they get into a scuffle, and he pummels the guy, and the guy's face is all cut up. He's going on TMZ. He got beat up. He's this, he's that. Wait a second. They didn't know that Jack Reacher, whatever his real name is, had a GoPro on. And it was recorded from his perspective and his point of view. And once that video came out, the truth be told, that he was acting in self-defense because this guy jumped in front of his motorcycle not once, but twice, pushed him, made contact with him first, right? So but we see this all the time. So you take one piece of data and you throw it out to fit your narrative. You fit the nin narrative that everybody's racist because we lock up brown and black people, right? People of color are locked up. But they leave out the statistic of who is committing the crimes. You look at the stop and frisk, and I am absolutely not sitting here defending stop and frisk. I will defend stop and frisk. I will not defend the department's use of stop and frisk, that it wasn't, and I won't say that it was not overused. We've discussed that in the past. So I'm not going to say that. But when you look at, and you just take out one statistic of X amount of male blacks in this community were stopped versus X amount of male whites, male Asians. Show me the statistic, though, of the male black suspects, the male black perpetrators that are associated with the crimes that the male blacks or male Hispanics were stopped in conjunction with. Those statistics are always left out. And again, I'm not saying that stop and frisk was not abused, overused, and people were stopped for inappropriate reasons. I'm not saying that at all. However, these blanket statements by Nin and a few others are, all you want to do is you want to incite and you want to race bait and you want to do this and you want to do that. You want to say that every police department is corrupt, is brutal. We're going to show a video in a little while that was discussed at length today on Eric and John's show. We're going to give our executive opinion on that, on how we would have handled it had we responded as the duty inspector, the duty chief, which actually this case never would have rose to a duty chief at any stage that we're going to show. But we'll still talk about it from our executive perspective. It really wouldn't even got to the inspector. A captain would have handled this job. And you could technically say that a sergeant, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But again, stop. It's just,
I just want to address what Sleepy Joe says because
I'm way behind in the comments. Sorry.
That's all right. It's just because it confirmed. It's a great point. Takes out to what you just made mention is that's what's usually the perp description on the 61 and who provided that information. So if you look at the demographics of the victim, and you look at the demographics of the perpetrator who's listed on the UF 61, which is a complaint report, then you associate who you're going to stop. So if there's a female black who is assaulted by a male Hispanic, why would I stop every white guy that I see? No, the idea is to use that information and stop the people that are associated with the crime. So I think that that's a great point, what Sleepy Joe says, and it's attributes exactly to what you're saying. You gotta work with the information that you have. So I agree at a certain point when CompStat became a numbers game relative to stop, question, and frisks, and it wasn't so much as quality, it was more quantity. That's when it became problematic, because then you had guys just stopping people for the fact of stopping them. But if I was an anti-crime and when I saw there was a pattern of robberies, then I would do, I know that's hilarious. Then I would have to stop, the demographics that were listed. So it didn't matter to me what racial, ethnic group they were. It mattered to me what the information that I got, and that's what I worked off of.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Paw Patrol's
that's
racist because there's no cats in it.
like, remember who banned Paw Patrol? I forget, there was a
I
at
know my
one
daughter's
point
big time into it right now.
yeah, it was banned on one on Nick. I think Nickelodeon banned it at one point because of the anti-police rhetoric, and then they brought it back. But so, hey, we could talk about Paw Patrol and McGruff, because some police officer, the guy tried to bite the police officer. So, I mean, it's right up that alley.
And housing for life. Again, we're not denying that. We're not
Oh, yeah.
denying that stop, question, and frisk was used numbers for numbers. And I used to go to CompStat, and if you didn't have stop, question, and frisk bubbles over your robberies, over your burglaries, over your shootings, you heard hell. You caught hell. So, but again, when used, like Tommy says, when used appropriately, stop, question, and possibly frisk, right? When used appropriately, it's an excellent law enforcement tool.
And see, Sleepy Joe gave you a spot on. So
All right.
it's one
One up.
to 0.
No, you got one earlier.
I spot on?
Yeah, I got you. Somebody gave you a spot on. I put it up.
Oh, all right, 1-1 then. But yeah,
An executive
totally
mindset.
agree.
Give it up, y'all. Not on the job no more. Let it go, especially your shirt. Listen, we're not on the job anymore. We're not on the job anymore. We're here to give our perspective from the time we were on the job, and to hope that we could maybe influence some people and give them our perspective on how things are going, and to educate people. And thanks for being here and following the show and supporting the show. You're here for a reason, so you must want to hear something, right? You could be home. You could be having your Wiener Schnitzel like somebody else is talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I like I always say, listen, this is Ron and my perspective. This is from what we've learned. You can take it, use it to evaluate what's going on now, use it to make your decisions. It's just a tool in the toolbox. That's all. It's not. We're not saying the job. Oh, that we know. The job was much better when we were on the job, and the job. So we had problems when we were on the job, and you have to work through them. But if you have somebody that's going to be able to tell you, certain things, that this is how this was done, this is how this was done, and then maybe guide you, or maybe you can use our experience a little bit to make sure that any decisions that you make on the street now, where we both agree is completely vital against police officers. I wouldn't even want to be a cop at this point, with all the stuff that, especially with what I know as a police officer back then, and try to be a cop now. I don't think I would last. So just take the experience and watch the podcast and listen to what we say, and then make your own decisions. We're not telling you this is, this is the way you should do it and this is that. No, you need to take everything that's out there, experience, mistakes, and put it together, and then you can make an informed decision while you're out on the street. That's what our goal is, to give you a little bit of insight and a little bit to capability to protect yourself out there. Because we know it's rough.
Yeah. So that was the anticipation of what we might get from Mamdani. So 3 months in, what have we gotten from Mamdani? What have we gotten? We have a police-involved shooting in Queens where a perpetrator or emotionally disturbed person grabs a knife. We broke down this video on our show, the body-worn camera, and he goes to attack the officers, pushes past his mother. His mother's trying to hold him back. The officers actually, even though there's no duty to retreat, right, for a police officer, these officers try to give him very clear and verbal commands to drop the knife. They retreat back behind the door and close the door behind them. He gets through the door, and now they're in a smaller vestibule. Behind them is snow and icy stairs. So the officers really are left with no other choice, and they discharge the firearm. One officer discharges his firearm, striking the suspect or subject, we'll call him, because he's really an emotionally disturbed person. But we don't know that. You don't really know that at the time. You just know someone's coming at you with a knife, deadly weapon. So deadly physical force is justified. Nin, we just brutalized him. We went out that day just to go and shoot somebody. That's Nin's mindset. That's we're just out there because we want to shoot black and brown people. But so this person survived, thankfully, because it's a tragedy. No officer wants to go out the door. Every officer wants to go 20 years without having to fire their gun other than at the range, And so he survives. The officers go to the hospital for tinnitus. And what does the mayor do? What does the mayor do?
Yeah, he didn't visit. Who did he visit, right? He got in his car and went somewhere. He didn't go where he should have went, but unbelievable.
Did he didn't even reach out to the officers.
No.
They didn't even reach out. He goes and visits the person that went after his NYPD officers with a knife, who did what they could to de-escalate the situation, to retreat, to back out, to close the door and create a barrier, to do everything they could do not to have to engage in the use of deadly physical force. But unfortunately, it came to a point where they had to. Doesn't reach out to them. Goes to the hospital and visits this person that never should have been involved in this situation. Well, if the social justice system, instead of the criminal justice system, failed him, that's not the NYPD's fault. They still had to deal with the situation they had to deal with. Had he had his Department of Community Safety in place and he sent a couple of social workers to this job, first of all, how many would have been working? How long would it have taken them to get there? And how would they have handled the situation if this person still sees the Department of Community Safety coming in with whatever soft uniform they're going to wear, even if they're in civilian clothes? They're still going to have some type of identifying badge or ID card or something. And that person still sees them as figure of authority, which is something that they want to fight against. And he comes at them with a knife. They're not trained to take the actions that the police officers took. Right? So
No.
these are the things that we're going to see moving forward, unfortunately, with this Department of Community Safety. So he thinks that the police shouldn't be involved in this. And this is a perfect example. Before it became so evident that the officers did nothing wrong, he was going to, I believe, try to use this as a catalyst to prove his point that the police go there on a wellness check, engage with an emotionally disturbed person, and shoot him. But that wasn't the narrative that he could follow through with. So now he changed the switch narrative. He goes and visits the poor victim. He implores the Queens DA not to press charges against him, which the Queens DA did indict him on charges. So that's number one, where he's already showing who's the victim. Are the NYPD the victim? In that situation, they were, but no, not to Mayor Mamdani. The only thing missing here is his little smirk.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you look at it and you think about the Department of Community Safety and social workers responding to that call, it's gonna be very problematic, because what's gonna happen is, let's say they responded, like you just said, let's say they're available, and it doesn't happen over the midnight. It happens when they're available and they can respond. How are they responding, right? We have no information on, are they responding lights and sirens, and even can they respond lights and sirens? Two, when they get there and there's somebody that originally wasn't told, that person didn't have a knife when 911 originally called, and now all of a sudden produces a knife, then what happens? Okay, then what's the response time for police officers after that? This is a very chaotic, and it's a very dynamic scene. It happens very fast. All right, I've been on jobs where an EDP did not have a knife, did not have a weapon, and in 2 or 3 seconds reaches into a dresser, on the side of their bed, and pulls out a knife. So I mean, you remember, you're a guest in that house as a police officer. You don't know where things are hidden. You don't know where things are. That's why, right? We always say, get the EDP, emotionally disturbed person, out of the kitchen, because we know there's drawers, there's knives, right? Put them in a spot where it's safe. But what can be a weapon? We know anything can be a weapon. They could pick up a lamp and charge you with it. They can grab, like Vinny Gadis, right, during a domestic violence case in the 5-0, cut his leg on a glass table. So anything can become a weapon, or a deadly weapon. So, this to me is going to be chaotic. And I think Robert Murphy mentioned it earlier. It's gonna be ugly until somebody gets killed. And unfortunately, I God forbid any of my family members were social workers, I would tell them unequivocally, do not take this job. I mean, I don't even know how much they're going to pay them, but I would tell them, don't take this job. This is a death warrant. You're assigning a death warrant. It's not a matter of, it's a matter of when, not if. So I mean, it's very scary. So I think, and the fact that your mayor leaves the police hanging like that, and and basically by him going to that person is condemning that that shooting, in my opinion. And if you remember Kiki Garcia, I think it was Mayor Dinkins, which set off riots up in the 3-4 up in Harlem, paid for the wedding, paid for a wedding, paid for the funeral. Well, I said wedding. He's dead. Yeah, paid for the funeral. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So this has all the makings of another disaster.
Even worse. No, even worse. To me, it's even worse, because he's people aren't going to change He tries to say, oh, he was young, he was this, he was that. He never stepped back. He never apologized for anything that he said. All he said is,
and he
I
won't,
want to
right?
work with the NYPD. He's not
Yeah.
working with the NYPD. And I don't know how long Commissioner Tisch is going to last. She seems to be trying to stand up to him somewhat, and saying the things that he should be standing there saying. And we'll get into that in a minute too. But I see John is, carrying over the conversation from with Nin. In the first 9 months of 2025 in New York City, there were 356 shootings perpetrated by black individuals, with only 2 shootings perpetrated by white individuals. You know why, Nin? Oh, what happened? I jumped it. Oh. Because of white supremacy. It's my computer's jumping. Sorry, guys. And then Eric is the community safety will be more brutal with emotionally disturbed. Wait and see. I don't know. I mean, how are they going to defend themselves? How are they going to defend themselves? Because they're not trained. So they're gonna go to natural instincts. They're gonna go to untrained instincts, and they're gonna wind up going hand-to-hand combat on these people. And if these people, we all know, emotionally disturbed persons with their adrenaline are very difficult to get under control when they don't want to be put under control. Worse than a perpetrator that doesn't want to be arrested. And I don't know, what training are they going to get? There's so many unanswered questions. John put out a post the other day when he announced that he's starting his Department of Community Safety with only a few $1 million and a few people, because technically he hasn't been budgeted and he hasn't been approved by the city council, and he has to make some changes and whatnot. So many unanswered questions. So many unanswered questions as to what's going to be in this thing. What Commissioner Tisch said that 2% of the calls, I don't have the statistics, but 2% of the calls can be rerouted to the Department of Community Safety. Really? Really? Do you really think that's an honest number? I don't think it's an honest number.
What was the number?
2%. I forget how many tens of thousands of calls it was. Maybe Eric or John can, if they remember, can pop it in. But it was unbelievable because, like you just said, every emotionally disturbed person job has the potential to go south. And it may be the slightest trigger. Maybe the EDP doesn't mind cops and has had positive interactions with the cops, but doesn't like psychiatrists and psychologists and hospital people because they're the ones that jab them with the needles, and they're the ones that sedate them, and they're the ones. So maybe that authority figure is going to trigger them more than a cop would, right? Who knows? So again, though, point being, where's the support? Is the support for the NYPD? Cops are up against a leader that aren't supporting them. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next incident that the New York City mayor.
I just want to comment real quick,
Yeah.
because it's a little statement. What he's doing is he's making the job of an EDP into a barricaded EDP with a hostage as soon as those social workers get there. That's the potential. It's ridiculous. So it's just really asinine to even think that this is going to work. And like I said before, I feel very, very bad if any of them, got hurt, and I hope that they really evaluate it before they even take the position. So,
all right, John Duchenvier. Tisch testified in 2024. The NYPD responded to 4.3 million 911 calls. 123,000 of those were emotionally disturbed person calls. Of those, just over 37,000 came over 911 as violent. So 37,000 of 123,000, whatever that percentage is, right? So that's saying that another close to 86,000 calls were originally classified as non-violent. No data was provided on how many times force was used by the NYPD when the call was originally classified as non-violent. According to Tisch, that's roughly 2% of all 911 calls that could be diverted to the Department of Community Safety. How many, like John says, this is part of John's post, I believe, how many of those 85,793 calls that were non-violent EDPs did the cops walk into a shit show? How many of them turned into violent calls? Originally, it's just mom, dad, the neighbor calling up saying, Ron's wilding out again. Ron needs help. He's not taking his medication. Oh, okay. We're gonna send Rob and his Care Bear over to go and speak to him instead of the police department, right? So thank you for that, John. Appreciate it. So yeah, it's
How many calls did you go to that weren't classified properly anyway, right? From the information that was given to 911. You know, you could go 10 calls for help, and then you go there and it's a domestic,
Yeah.
assault in progress. It could be an EDP, right? How many times did domestic cases where you had to reclassify it, 93 Frank or whatever, you had to reclassify it because what it was originally, it was improper. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is just
yeah.
terrible.
We've talked about this before. Eric and John have talked about it at length. And training. They're gonna have to retrain these 911 dispatchers. Don't even acknowledge it.
No,
I know.
Frank's cracking. Frank, did you see Frank's comment?
Yeah, Frank's.
This is Ron
yeah.
Survivor tonight.
I'm not paying attention to Frank's comments.
Oh no, he's out, Frank. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, listen, we've done it in the past. We could continue to talk about the Department of Community Safety. Point being here is mainly where does the support lie? The support doesn't lie with the police. The support lied with the person that attacked the police, whether they're emotionally disturbed, whether they have criminal intent, some nefarious. There's an Eric word for you, some nefarious intent, right? It doesn't matter. He didn't support his police who acted in a very, I think, courageous manner and did everything they could to de-escalate that situation, and were put into a very, very difficult situation because what I think Mamdani is forgetting is that officer that was involved in that shooting is a human being that does not want to take somebody else's life, and was put into a position where he had to use deadly physical force to stop a threat against himself. And instead of being empathetic towards the police officer and what the police officer was put through, he was empathetic only to the person that was going through a crisis, but attacked the police officer. You could have done both. But he didn't. Then, what do we have? It was just a snowball fight. We talked about this at length, right? We talked about this. No support for the police department, none whatsoever. Even when it came out who the perpetrator was, when he was arrested, he still doubled down, tripled down on every interview, on every question, at every presser that someone was able to get an off-topic question in about it. He doubled down that it's only a snowball fight. When these officers were pelted, these officers were run out. They went there. They were called there because of what was going on and a dangerous situation of people being up on a rooftop when there's snow that could fall off and get hurt. And then they got pelted with snow and ice and rocks, and the police were chased away. Who's the authority figure? The police. You're there. You're supposed to be in control. We had no control because they were being assaulted. They were being assaulted. They were being harassed. They were being chased down the block. And we saw it in the videos. We talked about it. Again, no support for the police. This is what the police are coming into work and they're dealing with, which is leading them to have these thoughts of, when can I leave? How can I leave? when can I be financially well enough to leave? And if I have 20 years on, do I need to put up with this shit anymore when I don't even have the chief executive of the city of New York supporting us?
Yeah, I mean, this snowball fight was a failure of leadership by the NYPD because there was injuries. Those officers went to the hospital. There was that day that the leadership should have been there. It was failed leadership by the Mayor Mamdani, completely. And to this day, the rhetoric continues. No saying anything differently. And yeah, those officers, they had a retreat. And when you get treated like that, as such, when you lose support externally, we'll talk about from the mayor's office. When you lose support from internally, from your own police department,
Just as Rita's saying right there.
yep, that's where the NYPD guys are running for the door because there's your reason right there. And now you're gonna take money out of their pockets too. I mean, all of these factors is a defund through attrition. It's what he wants to do. He's doing it, and it's a systematic, planned attack on the NYPD.
Yeah. You're going from this, right? From having to retreat and they didn't physically run, but to have to walk away from this to walking into the pension fund.
That guy ate a lot of donuts, though. That guy. The guy running towards the door.
Yeah. And listen, Detective Nolan, I don't have expectations that Mamdani's going to wake up and start supporting NYPD. I don't. And I really didn't have those expectations when he was voted into office.
Mm-mm.
I didn't have those expectations. Listen, I can pray. I can hope that for some type of miracle. But I did not have expectations. I didn't have high expectations. I don't have high expectations. I said it from the beginning that things are going to get a lot worse before they can get any better. And speaking of getting worse, then we have the incident that we discussed last week. We have an ISIS-inspired attack on New York City, outside of his own residence to boot, but it's irrelevant where it happened, right? It's a matter of a known ISIS-inspired attack. By time those perps were back at the station house, they knew, because of spontaneous utterances that both perpetrators had made, that they were ISIS-inspired and what their intentions were. And then all the evidence just grew from there.
Yeah, no, I'm
And
sorry, but
where was the mayor? We talked
mean,
about this, and it just blows my mind. And I don't want to get red in the head again, and then have
yeah,
people.
they mentioned it earlier that they don't
Son
want to
was
see
telling me
it.
to watch my blood pressure tonight because I got so
Yeah.
impassioned last week about certain things, and this is going to get me going again because where was our mayor? Where was my mayor? I'm not going to say our mayor because you were driven home recently.
Listen, when you bring up the mayor, I mean, it's not a surprise. I know you brought it up, and I mean, I have to mention it. And John and Eric mentioned it this morning. You have Chief Edwards at a Knicks game getting notoriety, and we still haven't I think it's Polglarin. I hope I'm saying his name right. The recognition that he deserves. So listen. After I came back from deployment in Haiti, right, where I went down with the New York Task Force One, there were times I was on New York One, I was on Fox and Friends, I was on a couple of things, but I didn't go on any of them without somebody else with me because I didn't do the work down there. All right, it's easy to lead people to battle, but the people that do the battle are the soldiers behind you, and you saw what he did, what Officer Polgarin did. What an amazing takedown, right? Amazing take with his leg extended, pushes him down. And like John and Eric and Marlon had brought up today, you see Chief Edwards like holding him back, like, oh, you're assaulting him. When he is extremely lucky that there was not a suicide vest on him, because all he had to do, if you don't take both of their arms and hold on to them, they could easily put their arms together with a detonator. They could easily activate something. I mean, extremely lucky. And for Chief Edwards to take all this credit, to me, that's not a true leader. Okay, I've been to City Hall, and we did things as a team. All right, and that's what it is. As a supervisor, you're not there to take the credit. You're there to give the credit to the people that do the work. And it appalls me to see that he's doing all of that. And it makes me angry to see that, Tish is pushing that, because she could change the narrative. When we went to Madison Square Garden for a Knicks game also. They gave us a skybox. But anybody from the team that was available, we all went. I didn't go myself. I didn't sit in the stands. I didn't sit behind the team. All right, we went up in the skybox. And keep in mind that we still got charged for the water that was in the refrigerator. So whatever the case may be. But you got to do it as a team effort. I mean, it's ridiculous that he is standing there. And is it a narrative that fits the Tish's position? Is it a narrative that the mayor sees it? Although even the mayor, like you said, does not even acknowledge that it was a terrorist attack, right? It was just, they were, I guess it was like a snowball fight. They were just throwing friendly bombs or whatever. It was a friendly bomb throwing. So, I mean, that infuriates me. And what I always say is, as a supervisor, your job is to motivate and elevate. Okay, motivate the men and women that work for you, and when you can, elevate them to a position. Whether or not you could elevate them by telling them, "Hey, Ron, you would make a great sergeant. You should study for the test. I've seen you on jobs. You do excellent work. Get out there and do that." So, or somebody else on a job. Oh, you handled that crime scene perfectly. You should really go to the squad. You should either go to squad or maybe crime scene or whatever, because there's plenty of options within the NYPD. That's one of the great things about the NYPD. But your job as a supervisor, again, is to motivate and elevate. And I don't see that. You don't take the credit. The credit's not yours. The credit's for the people that did the job. He was lucky. They were lucky, but his actions were horrific in my opinion. So I think you're muted.
Sorry, did a Marlin. We aren't going to talk about it, but we'll show the video one time of this great open field tackle.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Just watch. Look at this.
Look at that leg, fully extended.
Great work. So yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely great work. And like you said, it's your job as a leader to promote and push forward your people. And I've said it before. One of the reasons I stayed on the job is because I still had some ability and some influence to help people. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed having that ability to make phone calls for people that are doing a great job out there and getting them into a squad or getting them, a little leg up on an interview because they're coming with a reference. Because people knew I didn't make a phone call for just anybody. So to be able to help people and to move people forward is what your job is. And I learned that early on in my executive career. And I've said it before, when I was the in charge of the Queens North Blast Unit before I went up and ruined Task Force. That team did such phenomenal work. But every 49 that I did, the narrative of the 49, which is the report on type letterhead that you send up of whatever actions we did, whatever cases we were doing, under the direct leadership and supervision of Lieutenant Robert Radigan, under the direct, supervision of Sergeant, Joe Tarsio, whatever the case may be. And I would give them the credit because they're the ones with the boots on the ground. They're the ones that were there. And I had the fortune of being put up at Comstat twice to talk about that unit and the good things they were doing and how they were being successful. And it wasn't I. You never heard the word I come out of my mouth because it was always the team that was doing it. And again, I always say it when you're the boss, right? If your team is great, you're great. But if you're not being successful, it's on you as the leader. You can't put it on the men and women unless they are just completely incompetent and not following through with the things that you're asking them to do. And then again, it's on you as a leader to change that. So you're the failure. So the success is on them. You get some credit. The failure, you have to own. That's how I believe it. And that's not what people are dealing with today. So, these are the things that are leading to people running for the door, right? We look at Mamdani. He knows that it's an ISIS-inspired. We talked about this, but I have to mention it again. He knows it's an ISIS-inspired attack where the NYPD got lucky. The city of New York got lucky. They were not successful. They were successful in apprehending them after the bombs didn't blow up. They were successful at that. They weren't successful at preventing it. They weren't successful at properly policing that event, properly monitoring and vetting that event where those people may or may not have gotten in if SRG was used either proactively or even reactively, like we discussed it again, not going to get into it. But what does Mayor Mamdani do? He doesn't say, we just dodged a big bullet. We just got lucky because these bombs didn't activate. What does he say? White supremacist. Maybe this is Nin. Is it Zoran Kwame Nin Mamdani? White supremacist Jake Lang organized a protest outside Gracie Mansion, rooted in bigotry and racism. Such hate has no place in New York City and is an affront to our city values and the unity that defines who we are. So no bigotry, no racism, except from maybe his wife, who's just a private citizen. But we won't even get into that, right? What followed is even more disturbing. Violence at a protest is never acceptable. An attempt to use an explosive device to hurt others is not only criminal, it's reprehensible and the antithesis of who we are. Stop. He never wants to call it out. So again, and thanks to the cops for being out there. Thanks. We appreciate you.
If you don't identify the problem, you can't fix it, right? So he's clearly not looking to even identify the problem. So what do you think? It's not going to happen again? Listen, this was a failed attempt, not a prevented attempt. And what will happen is you'll see somebody else trying to make it right. So I know I thought that was funny, Terry Mullane with the Black Sox, right?
Yep. Hit that like and share. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate you always being on the show.
That was the other thing. I remember after 9/11 when everybody was getting tickets to go to all these special events.
After 9/11.
Yeah, after 9/11, yeah. I think there were tickets to Disney. There were tickets. I was in a borough, and so we would get them. And obviously, I wasn't going to take anything because I knew most of the guys that were going down there and stuff that were sacrificing, hours down there. We would make sure that we gave it out to the precincts and different units in the borough. But I remember that the chief of patrol's office was like skimming off the top, like the people down there. We're going to more of those, trips to Disney and everything else. And I was like, this is appalling that, even back then was like, how did they skim off the top when they're all sitting down in the puzzle palace, not doing a damn thing? And I'm sending, the men and women every day down there to dig and look for our, the survivors and remains of the poor members of the service that we lost. That was appalling. So I just, when I thought about, Edwards going to the MSG, I thought about that too. Like that would have been a great opportunity for Edwards to say, you know what, let me give it to Polgren, the cop that actually, stopped the guy, and or get 2 seats. I would have loved to seen him sitting next to him, So I don't know, that's where I'm, I don't know. Craziness.
It took him over almost 24 hours to put out that first post. And that he was by then so well informed about what that really was.
Mm.
And that's how he poses that post. It's about him.
Yeah.
It's about anti-Islamophobic protest, right?
Yeah.
Bigotry towards him is not acceptable, but bigotry towards Israel, pro-Palestine, all of that is acceptable to him and his family, right? But then he doesn't get in front of a camera for another day, and he still doesn't really acknowledge it. The police commissioner has to be the one to say it. Any major event, you see the governor and the mayor and the chief law enforcement agency with their federal partners standing at the podium. You saw Chief Edwards, the police commissioner, and the chief of transit, who was probably the duty chief, or possibly acting chief of department, because LePetri might have been on vacation and didn't get back in time yet. He did come back right away. He was my thoughts is he was away, and Joe was the acting chief of department, and that's why he was standing there, even though he wasn't even introduced. Right?
It should have been introduced though. Right. At that point. Right.
He should have been introduced, because everybody's like, "Why is the chief of transit standing there?" It makes no sense. Because police chiefs don't have the duties, so
no,
it doesn't even make sense. So he wasn't even the duty chief. So whatever. So anyway, you always see, and I said that on our show, you always see them there. You never saw it. You still haven't heard from Holchel. They never stood together and talked about it. No follow-up and transparency on the investigation or anything else. But a week later, somebody drives a car into a synagogue in Minneapolis, and he's tweeting out that they're following that and that the NYPD is on heightened alert with special attention to Jewish locations within an hour. Last night or 2 nights ago, there was a horrific plane accident where the plane was landing and the Port Authority the fire truck was given permission to cross across the runway. The plane crashes into it. The 2 pilots, the pilot and the co-pilot, male and female, were killed from Air Canada. Prayers to their families. The LaGuardia Airport's closed. What did I see on the news? Mayor Mamdani and Governor Holchel are there. As they should be. Don't get me wrong, as they should be. But why weren't they there at the other one? So you don't have the support. And when you don't feel supported, it doesn't make you feel welcome. It doesn't make you feel like you want to be part of that team. That's my thing with saying that's why people want to leave. And when they hit their 20, they're looking at their number. They're running for the door.
It's funny you say the thing about Port Authority, because Mamdani goes there. Okay. He has no jurisdiction there. Okay. That's run by the Port Authority. The Port Authority is run by the New Jersey governor and the New York governor. And that's where the funding comes from. When we used to go out, because if you remember, there used to be a rift between the NYPD and the Port Authority and hiring. When we used to go out,
I know that very well.
when ESU when the president would fly into Kennedy, okay, and there was a Lieutenant Ryan out there who became the acting chief of the Port Authority, and then self-demoted himself back to lieutenant. It shows you how lucrative money is as a lieutenant in the Port Authority. And by the way, they are taking applications right now, the Port Authority in New York. But ESU was not allowed to go out on the tarmac because Port Authority said, we don't want you guys out there. So we would have to jump into the motorcade once they came out onto the belt. Eventually, things were, washed over, and, things have happened. And if you saw, members of ESU actually responded out there and assisted, the Port Authority with the plane crash. But it was problematic for a while. So Mamdani does not have jurisdiction at all on Port Authority ground. And I guess for some reason he felt the necessity to go out there and talk with the governor. But what it was is it meant no implication to him at all as far as the city goes, right? There was nothing could be saying anything. Oh, it was a terrorist attack, it was this, it was that. No, so he's out there on what would be considered as a guest, and his neutrality is, I had nothing to do with it. It's and we're here to support. So I just think that it was an easy time to get his face on the camera. It was an easy time to get Hochul's face on the camera, but it meant nothing. When did we need them? After 2 bombs were thrown right by Gracie Mansion to give. And if you remember Giuliani and, God rest his soul, Bernie Kerik, the calmness that they projected after 9/11 gave a sense to everybody in the police department, everybody in the city. And I'm sure why is he called, the mayor of America's mayor? Because everybody across America, he gave that straight level, calm talking demeanor that, hey, this happened, but we're going to find out who did it, and we're going to take care of it. And we're going to take care of the men and women that, sacrificed their lives, which he did. So that's where we needed Mamdani to stand up. We don't need him to stand up in front of a plane accident. We need him to stand up in a terrorist attack that was for those officers there and the people there. Unfortunately, for the terrorists, it didn't work out, right? But a lucky day for the city. That's where you needed somebody to talk about it. And like you said, where's the follow-up? What's going on with the investigation? What have these people said? Are there any sleeper cells? Is there anything that's going to happen later on? Nothing. Bugats.
Back to the Italians again.
Tommy wanted me to do Bugats. I don't.
Bugats. All right. All right. Went a little longer than we thought with that one, but kind of mixed in a few other things, kind of bringing things back around. It's tough. It's tough not to, with everything going on. And like I said, there's more to it than that. That article basically just portrayed it as people run out the door because of the overtime. And that's never been the case. Occasionally somebody will leave because their numbers are just too good. After 9/11, that did happen because we were working 12-hour to 16-hour to 18-hour tours, 7 days a week. So it was like insane amounts of numbers that people would never be able to replicate and keep up. So they maxed out their 20% above, 20% above, and knew that they weren't going to be able to do that again. So that's a rare exception. So there's so much more to why people are making the decision to leave. But it just gets to the point when you have all these other things to take into consideration, it's forcing you to look at your numbers. So that's with that. So let's get into anything else?
No, totally agree.
All right, so let's take a look. There's John and Eric did and Marlon did their show today, and really broke down this video from a cop's a frontline supervisor's point of view, and they talked about the patrol guide procedure. They talked about the New York State penal law giving you the authority for the use of force. We're going to touch on some of the patrol guide procedures too, but we're going to take a look at this video. And you know, for those of you who watched the show this morning, you know, or haven't seen the video, it's a video of a male who's being struck by a uniformed police officer while he's in handcuffs. So that sounds pretty bad, right? But when you look at the video, and we're going to give it to you in context of if we were the responding investigating supervisor as an executive, what we're looking at, what we see from our perspective, and what we think the outcome of the investigation would be and should be in this instance. So let's just take a look at the video, and then we'll get into some patrol guide guidelines to show you where our perspective or where our guidance comes from as to what we're looking for and looking at during an investigation.
Set him up, turn him over. Let him take a fucking neck. You are responsible male coming over on the second avenue.
I got zero thoughts in my pocket.
Radio. You're okay? No, I'm good. No, I'm good.
So there's the video. And now I'm going to mute it, and we'll take a look a little bit closer at it and just point out a couple of little things on it. Right? So let me bring it back up. Oh, hold on. So here you see, as they have him down and they're handcuffing him, he's flailing. He's got a mouthful of the cop's pants. And he's striking, he's giving hand strikes to the chest and side until he releases. All right. So we'll get into a little more detail after. But let's take a look at the things that we look at before we break down the video. So when we're looking at things, right, we're guided by the patrol guide. I'll make this bigger so people might be able to see it, right? So this is Patrol Guide 22101, Force Guidelines, right? The primary duty of all members of the service is to protect human life, including the lives of individuals being placed into custody. Force may be used when it is reasonable to ensure the safety of a member of the service or a third person, or otherwise protect life, or when it is reasonable to place a person in custody or to prevent escape from custody. In all circumstances, any application or the use of force must be reasonable under the circumstances. All members of the service at police incidents must use reasonable force, employ less than lethal alternatives, such as hand strikes, prioritize de-escalation, and whenever possible. If the force is used as unreasonable under the circumstances, it will be deemed excessive and in violation of department policy. So let's talk about that, right? Obviously, you know, we're there to take care of everybody in the public, right? Let's just look real quick at some definitions, right? De-escalation, right? Basically, take everything to try and reduce the threat and take the temperature down, right? The objective reasonableness standard, Graham v. Connor, right? The Supreme Court states, the reasonableness of the use of force is based upon the totality of the circumstances known by the member of the service, not the general public people, known by the member of the service at the time of the use of force. The department examines the reasonableness of the force viewed from the perspective of a member with similar training experience placed into the same circumstances as the incident under investigation. That's straight out of Graham v. Connor. What is excessive force? Excessive force is a use of force deemed by the investigating supervisor, which is going to be us for this segment, as greater than that which which a reasonable officer in the same situation would use under the circumstances that existed and were known to the MOS at the time the force was used. Right? We have the prohibited methods of restraint, which is from the diaphragm law. Sitting, kneeling, or standing on the chest, the back of the subject in a manner that compresses the diaphragm, thereby reducing the subject's ability to breathe. You can't do a chokehold. And then it's different when you talk about the mass ramming. So these are things that we're looking at when we do an investigation. And then one more thing in this procedure, Rob, and then I'll let you go, right? You go down to page 4, page 3 into page 4. Members of the service shall not, so they're prohibited, right? Shall not use a prohibited method of restraint, which is what we talked about for the diaphragm law. Use a chokehold. Use any level of force to punish, retaliate, or coerce a subject to make a statement. So if the guy pisses you off, you can't punch him. If he pissed you off before, now that he's in cuffs, you can't punch him. Use any level of force on a handcuffed or otherwise restrained subject, unless, here's the big word, people, and if you're studying for the exam, here's the big word, unless necessary to prevent injury, escape, or overcome active physical resistance of or assault.
Yeah, so if you're studying, right, those are key words: unless, may, can. That's where they try to trip you up on a test question. So if you are studying, look at those things, because those are the exceptions. What I also like to point out is what you just showed in 220 221. It also says prevent, right? So it specifies that you don't have to be injured. It's to prevent an injury. So when you prevent it, that's what that officer was doing. What I also say is what that officer did was he was reacting to what the perpetrator or the handcuffed EDP was doing. Okay. It wasn't a action of his own. It was a result of what that individual was doing. So if somebody's in cuffs, right, and they had spoken about this morning on the podcast that Eric, John, and Marlon did, there was the old saying, right, and we've heard it, once the handcuffs are on, it's game over, and that's not necessarily true. It's once the handcuffs are on, and you have a compliant EDP, you have a compliant perpetrator, then the game is over. But that does not mean if somebody's trying to bite you or somebody's trying to kick you, that you just say, oh, the handcuffs are on and the fight's over. Absolutely, unequivocally not. All right. That's why we have restraining straps. That's why the emergency service has the mesh blanket that we can, some call it the taco, that we wrap them up and seal it. We have a spit hood because, again, it's the cuffs are on, but that doesn't mean the game's over, right? You don't want somebody spitting in your face. You don't want to be, have spit go into your mouth or anything else. All right. We talk about diseases and everything else that anybody can get. So I say that the action of that officer, again, was to prevent, like the patrol guide says, to prevent. And like you said, you use those words, unless, may, and can. It said it, right? It says it right there. So yes, absolutely. As the investigating officer, our first look at that is to see, well, obviously the first thing we have to do is make sure that the officer is not hurt. All right. Then we want to make sure that they follow the procedure. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the procedure because sometimes you're not always not familiar with it or whatever. So you look it up and it says right there, unless to prevent. And at that point, you would have to say, I think the officer did a phenomenal job. I mean, he did what he had to do. I think my first reaction would have been to punch the guy in the head just to stop him. He's closest right there. I would have been popping him in the head just to get him off me because I don't know if I never got bit, but I've seen bite marks. I've seen cops that got bit. And you talk about looking at their arm and they got the huge ring and you can see that like where the teeth were embedded. And that's just a regular bite. Imagine when they continue to bite and they rip the skin, that's a permanent scar. That's a serious physical injury. You're talking about an assault felony. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's my first take on it. That's how I would have evaluated it initially. And like you said earlier, it wouldn't have got to you or I. It wouldn't have got to you. That could have just been a force report by the patrol supervisor.
Well, I'm a little on the fence with that, and I'll show you why. Because I think this might be a level 2. It could be a level 1, but I think just to be on the safe side, it should be bumped up to a level 2.
But that depends on the injury, right?
No, it depends. Let me
strikes or blows. I don't know.
Yeah, strikes or blows is a level 1, right? Let me hold on. Let me scroll past it. I'm not doing it on the screen. It's in.
Well, I was saying it didn't get to you or I. I mean, it may have gotten to the duty captain, but that's about it.
No, it's neither one. It's not going to get to either one of us. It's going to get to a duty captain. Let me bring it up. But I mean, like Tabitha Foster is saying that the punches did look unnecessary. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that. You just explained it. He's biting at his pant leg, right? But you really can't see in the beginning of the video, and before I bring up the level 1, level 2, right? In the very beginning here, we don't know if that officer that's landing these strikes, has his pant leg in the guy's mouth. Did he actually bite his leg here that made the officer stand up, and him standing up was able to release his skin and he only still had the pants in his mouth? I don't know. That's a possibility because you see him get up and you see now there he's got the pant leg in his mouth. But it doesn't mean that he can't move forward and get a bite of the leg, right? So he's actively resisting, which is other definitions I was going to do, but he's actively resisting and he's also assaulting the officer by biting him. So as you see, he's biting at the officer. He could have possibly already bit the officer and got his skin. We don't know because the view is obstructed at the very beginning of his interaction with this officer with the gloves, right? That's about to lay these 5 or 6 strikes onto him, right? So he doesn't punch him in the face, which could have been an option, but really doesn't have access to his face. But let's take it 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 punches. Did I miscount? 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see after the 3rd punch, and he's winding up for the 4th punch is when he lets go, and the 4th punch is already in motion. I'm not going to fault him for that 4th punch, right? But the key here is the officer didn't take it personal. The officer wasn't doing it to be punitive. The officer wasn't pissed off that this guy bit his leg or was biting at his leg. The officer was striking him in his torso like we're taught to do, right? In order to prevent this assault. And as soon as he stopped biting at the leg and he let go of the officer's pant leg, the strikes ended. So I'm going to disagree with you, Tabitha. I'm going to disagree with you there. And just to get back to what you were saying, Rob. Oh, hold on, I gotta take this other thing down. It's a little different when I'm sharing my screen, right? So the force incident levels, right? A level 1 is hand strikes or foot strikes, which is what we have here. Forcible takedowns, which we probably had here. Wrestling, grappling with a subject who's actively resisting, kind of have that here. Discharge the pepper spray, we didn't see that. Using a mesh restraining blanket, like you talked about, didn't see it. However, we will see at the end that they do put a mesh hood on his face. So could that be the one? But again, that's only a level 1. Discharge the CEW in cartridge mode. They didn't do that. Physical injury to any subject or civilian member or bystander, we could say that he has a physical injury from being struck. But where I'm saying the next level would be the captain, not even us, but the captain. And that's why I'm saying, as the executive perspective, even though it wouldn't have raised to the inspector or the chief, we'll give the perspective of a captain as an executive, right? So the commanding officer, executive officer, or duty captain must respond and investigate the following unless superseded by the authority of the internal affairs or the force investigation. Intentionally striking a person with any object. We did not see that. It was a closed fist. A police canine bite, use or discharge of the CEW in the dry stun mode, we didn't see that. But here's where I say it probably fits, and you would be safe to go to a level 2 and bring it up to the captain. Any prohibited act as outlined in 221.01 force guidelines other than the alleged or suspected use of a chokehold or prohibited method of restraint for those that result in a serious physical injury, because that bumps it up to a level 3, or a firearms discharge which bumps up to a level 4. So what I'm saying there is that because
it wasn't prohibited. It wasn't one of the prohibited things.
I'll say that's a gray zone because it's prohibited to strike anyone in handcuffs unless.
Well, that's not prohibited then.
Right, I agree. But that's why I'm saying I would not fault a sergeant or a lieutenant on the scene for bumping that up to a level 2 and calling a duty captain. Now, if the duty captain comes and says, I'm not handling this, you handle it as a level 1, I say that that's justified as well. I say, if I showed up, I was a duty captain, I would handle it. And the reason I would handle it is because I'm looking at that video, I'm looking at that body-worn camera, I'm looking at whatever I can look at, and I am at the opinion immediately that this officer did no wrong. And I would rather do the investigation, put the time into it, not be lazy, like a lot of executives are, not going to deny it, and say, I'm going to do this investigation because I want to make sure it gets done right, gets documented properly, because I don't think the cop did anything wrong.
Yeah, I don't know many captains that would do that.
I know. That's the sad state of, where we're at.
That captain would have been like, "Hey, this is a level 1. You do it. That's it. I'm done." And whatever you put it. I mean, could the sergeant put him down as notified or whatever? I guess, or the lieutenant. Yeah, you could do that, but I don't know any captain that would say, "All right, I'm going to investigate this so you don't get." And you're right. There should be some that say that, right? There should actually be some. That would be a commendable thing to do, but I think for the most part, there's no way that a captain would do that. Like Reed saying, captains would do that as it will deploy their promotion, delay their promotion. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying they're not going to put themselves in that mundane thing.
And like Sleepy Joe saying, it's going to be another Juan Perez situation where the first 3 strikes were justified and the last strike was excessive. I don't think so, because it's in such close proximity, and he stopped. And now, once he stopped, I also will play the video further, right? And then bring up a couple of points, because we look at the totality of circumstances, right? We come in, we want to look at the entire situation, right? Because we want to take into consideration, were these strikes punitive? How was this cop's demeanor? These are the things we're looking at, right? When we're doing investigations. What was the cop's demeanor? What was the cop's demeanor before, during, and after? And if you look at the video, and I'll take the volume off and bring it back in. So as soon as he stops striking him, let me take down Sleepy Joe's comments. Watch what they do next.
Sit him up. Turn him over.
Do you hear the cop? Sit him up, turn him over. They're putting him in a recovery position, in a position that gives him the ability to have as much free breathing as possible.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they're supposed to do, right? To take him out of that position where he's face down, because it compresses your chest. It makes it difficult to breathe, and roll him over and put him on his side, or sit him up. That's he followed. I don't know. He followed everything that he was supposed to do. I don't know. I don't know what the issue here is, and why some people don't think it's acceptable. Just think about how fast and dynamic this happens. It's not something that's like, there was no. You have to look at like you said, before the demeanor. I look at the intent. What was his intent? The intent was to stop the person from biting at his leg. That was the intent. The intent was not to cause any pain or any damage or anything else. Sometimes, and we've been taught that, within the police department, there is a necessity for pain compliance. Okay, so you can either use a pressure point, you can use physical force, but pain, and that's also in the martial arts, right? Pain compliance. So I mean, it's not unheard of, and it's something that you're taught to use, right? So I mean, I understand exactly how that officer felt and how he needed to do that, and I would have done the same. Like I said, I probably would have hit him in the head. That would have been my thought, to get his mouth off my pants, off my leg, because I'm not going home with a bite mark on my leg. So, first of all, my wife wouldn't believe that I got it from an EDP. That would be the first thing. But I just think that, I think he did a good job, and I don't know why there's this controversy over, he should be fired, or he should be disciplined, or anything else. I think he did it. He did a good job. So
We're just Joe cops.
Yeah, I don't know why you can't fire everybody, right? I mean, come on.
And listen, and again, only because it's gone viral, it's out there. Sal Greco posted this on his social media. He got a lot of pushback from in the comments. He got some support from his followers, but he got a lot of pushback that it was justified, and he kept fighting and fighting that narrative that it was justified, and saying how egregious it was. And I just want to, it was, I'm trying to, I had it here.
What's Sal's post? Or?
It was something that Sal posted that really caught me off guard. One of his replies is that he was flabbergasted at the bloodlust of some who would cheer the beating of someone in custody and in control and handcuffed. He was not he was handcuffed. I guess he was in custody because you had 3 officers there that were holding him down. He was not in control. They did not have complete control of him. So he wasn't beaten. So the bloodlust of some who cheer on the beating of someone in custody and in control and handcuffed. Did Sal write that, or did somebody else write that for him? Because really, that wasn't, number one, it wasn't a beating. He was struck 4 times. And as soon as he let go of the pant leg, he stopped. He stopped. It wasn't a beating. He didn't get punched in the face. He didn't get kicked. He was trying to maintain control of the perpetrator while landing hand strikes to his upper torso in order to gain compliance and have him remove and no longer further either assault or attempt to assault a member of the service. And, you know, Eric Sanders, you know, Detective Nolan is saying it's Eric Sanders. Eric Sanders made his own comments in his own posts. You know, they put out some things about use of force in custody, and it doesn't apply here. I'm sorry. It does not apply here. I know I don't have a law degree. I'm not asserting to be a lawyer, but I was an NYPD executive who investigated a ton of use of force allegations. And so did you. And that doesn't mean that we were biased against anyone because we didn't find them at fault. Because I don't find this officer at fault who, let me see something. I can't tell, but he doesn't look like a male white to me. But I'm just trying to say it's not about a racial incident. It's not, you know, this isn't Rodney King getting beaten with nightsticks. This is a person, probably an EDP, who's acting irrational, trying to be taken into custody, probably bit the officer because you can't see, but is attempting to assault the officer. There's no doubt about that. And the officer used the minimal amount of force necessary, okay? The minimal amount of force necessary.
Yeah, you know,
2102. Let me look. I want to show this. I skipped ahead to bring that other thing. But go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say Marlon had brought it up earlier today. You know, we've had incidences where, and I was just trying to look it up. I couldn't find it, and I apologize. I think it was there was two detectives that were driving a perpetrator in the back of the car, and he pulled out a gun and killed both of them. It was. I think they were both from the 6-7 precinct. If I'm not mistaken. But the point being is if you had turned around, I believe the guy was in the back by himself. I think that might have been one of the reasons why we drive in the back of the car with the perpetrators. But if that perpetrator, even though he was cuffed, was able to get a handgun and shoot these two officers, you would have done anything you could, even though that person was in custody and was handcuffed, right? If you saw that guy reaching in his back and pulling out a gun, I would have punched him in the face. I would have punched him in the neck. I would have punched him everywhere I can to stop that, right? Then, and that's what I'm saying. This officer here did what he had to do to stop and prevent injury to himself. So, I mean, I don't understand why they think that this was wrong. Well, this is not the beating of a perpetrator. It's not a, you know, the guy's laying on the ground and we're just hitting him and say, get up, get up, get up. No, that's different, right? That, you know, when you go in limp and not complying, that doesn't mean doesn't necessitate force. So I just think everything that was done followed the patrol guide. And like you said earlier, 3 blows, he stopped. Once he realized that the guy was no longer attached to his leg. I mean, he was attached to the guy's leg.
And then they rendered aid.
Yes.
Then they put him in a recovery position, roll him over. And I didn't play the video all the way to the end, but you'll see he continues to resist. And they don't use any force. And then, yes, they held his head down, but you'll see they held his head down because he was banging his head on the ground after they got the thing. So Tabitha here is saying it doesn't look like the other officers tried to pull him away from the cop's leg. The perp was able to stay on the cop's pant leg too long. Tabitha, let's time this, Tabitha. Let's time this. Time this, Tabitha. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Tabitha, these officers are trying to control him. You have 2 other officers that are moving him around and trying to control him. You're talking about 5 seconds. You were an officer. 5 seconds, Tabitha. 4 strikes. He stopped. The strikes stopped. Come on now.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was not done for the purposes of like, I'm gonna teach this guy a lesson. I'm not gonna do anything else. But I mean, like TC saying right there, cuffs aren't immunity. That doesn't, just because you have cuffs on doesn't mean that that's the game's over. There's still a ability of somebody to get assaulted. Again, why do the supervisors, why do the issue have restraining straps, right? Because people kick and they can still cause injury to somebody. Why do we use leg shackles? Because we feel that the person could be a flight risk or anything else, or use their legs as weapons as well. John and Eric and Marlon again talked about like a headbutt, right? You take your head and you smack somebody in the head with it. That's dangerous too. So I think that everything that was done, in my perspective, in my investigative experience as a supervisor, I wouldn't have found any fault. I would have done the appropriate reports, and that officer would have been back to command, no meal, right, as they say. So he would have been right back on the streets. So
No, I agree, and it blows my mind really that it's so vehemently being opposed online by some people. And again,
Yeah.
I don't want to make this personal. It's not personal. It's you know, I, I I just don't understand how you could say that this is an assault and this is so egregious and this is so against department policy and use the word never. The word never is not there. The word never is not there. You know?
Yeah, no.
It- it's just not. And you can deny it all you want. It's clear as day. Unless necessary to prevent injury. He's trying to bite you. You have to prevent the injury, escape, or to overcome active physical resistance, which that is, or assault. Right? So
Yeah,
you can use
two
force
two
to
two key
prevent
words.
injury to himself. You're allowed to use
Yeah.
force to prevent injury for himself, let alone yourself, because that's the assault part and the physical resistance. So you have 3 out of the 4 unlesses checked off. Unless necessary to prevent injury. He's trying to injure himself because he's banging his head on the ground. Escape, I don't know that he's trying to escape. Or overcome active physical resistance, that's 2. Or assault, that's 3. So there's active physical resistance, there's injury to himself, and an assault.
Yeah,
I don't get where this is all coming from.
I don't know. Two key words I pick right out of that is unless and prevent. So it doesn't mean that means he didn't have to be assaulted. It doesn't mean that he had to be bit. Maybe he was, as you mentioned earlier. Maybe that EDP perpetrator, he's a perpetrator at this time. The perpetrator, locked onto him or whatever. But you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to prevent the assault. You don't have to be assaulted. You don't have to be bitten to then use physical force. Okay.
Right.
It's just that it could be just that the attempt, all right, to prevent it. You're stopping them from doing an assault. I would ask this question. What happens if he was biting another person What would you have done to pull his mouth off of that person? You're not going to put your fingers in his mouth. You're going to get your finger bit off.
Well,
So what are you gonna?
character just pull him.
What you could try to pull him, but then if he's locked onto somebody's skin, you're going to cause greater injury. So what are you going to do? You're going to do a pain compliance, which was done. You're going to do blows, whatever. So and again, I mean, you have to go. Everybody should go back, and if you haven't seen the show this morning, John, Eric, and Marlon did a great job. What if that was a dog? What if that was a dog locked onto somebody? What do? You shoot the
him.
dog.
Shoot him.
Shoot him in the head, right? So
here's,
come on.
Right. Here's another from the use of force, 222-02 for those who want to know. Number 12, assess the situation continually and adjust the use of force as necessary. Bingo! He assessed the use of force continuously. As he's using force, he's striking him. He's assessing that he still needs to strike him. Still needs to strike him. He stopped biting. I don't need to strike him anymore. So the use of force subsided. And then, because we got to move on. Hold on. The sharing the screen thing is killing me.
Turn him over.
Hit him up. Turn him over. Won't let him hit his head. That's why they're lifting him up off the ground, because he's trying to hit his head on the ground and cause himself an injury. Look at, he's trying to drive his head into the ground. That's why. That's another thing that was brought up on the other thread, is that he's pushing his head down into the ground. Eric Sanders complained about this. He's doing this to protect him from injuring himself, not to be punitive, and not to assault him, and not to use unnecessary, egregious force on him. If you listen to the officers, they're saying, don't let him hit his head, because he's trying to hit his head against the ground. That's why they're lifting him up and holding him up, but he's squirming around. As people that have ever been in the fight know, it's very difficult to control someone who's emotionally disturbed. We touched on it earlier, right, with Department of Community Safety, and they don't want to be controlled. So they're trying to control him. That's why they lift him up off the ground, and that's why now he's holding his head down against the ground, because he's spitting at them and he's trying to injure himself. So you're allowed to use force on someone in handcuffs to prevent injury. He's trying to injure himself. Let's continue. It's all right, bud. You're okay. This is what the cops are talking to him. De-escalation, trying to calm him down. They're not hooked. They're not being malicious. They're trying to get him assistance. Now, I'm not sure who this is, if it's SRG that has this mesh hood, or who this officer is that came out of the van with this mesh hood. Because I don't think patrol carries mesh hoods. If anybody knows, if you can let me know.
It's not SRG, because that uniform is not an SRG uniform. So I would assume maybe a supervisor or operator. Is that a sergeant that's standing there? I'm not sure, but I know for a while it was only ESU had it. So
let me see if we can get back to it when he walks up. She's coming from that van, right? Oh, is that an ESU truck? Is that an REP?
It does look like, yeah, it does look like an R. It's probably ESU guys then, yeah.
Right, so that's probably, yeah, that looks like an REP. I thought it was a van.
Because I know we're the only ones that had the spit hoods, and it was
so that means that
problematic.
they called emergency services, which is another thing you're supposed to do, right?
As an EDP, yeah.
As an EDP.
The spit hood, they wanted it to make that like a level 2 force. I mean, we had a fight on that. It's like that shows no resistance at all. So I mean,
right. And if you watch them apply it, they're very gentle. They're very gentle as he applies it, right? You all right? Ready? Get it ready? You're all right, bud. Lift his head up gently. You're okay, bud.
I'm good.
Put it on so he can't spit at them. Now he's banging his head again. And then the video cuts off. But you see,
actually, the person that put it on is not ESU though, because those aren't ESU uniforms. So I'm going to assume maybe the ESU guys gave the cops when they rolled up the spit hood right away, and then he ran over there because maybe they might be getting restraining straps and the mesh blanket. Because what I see here is if there's no patch on the back, which would identify them as emergency service or the strategic response group. So those are police officers.
what about the guy whose knee is there? Is all you really see is his knee. You can't really see the uniform at all. The cops lift his head up and slide it on, but all you see is his knee on the
I don't
left
see anything
side.
on the back though, but I mean.
Well, I don't see his back. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can't see his back. But either way, it looks like ESU showed up, whether they handed it off.
They may have given it to him. Yeah. Absolutely.
So listen, and I think that they did. I think this guy did a phenomenal job, to be perfectly honest with you. I
just want real quick, one battle after another one, a bunch of soft kids in ESU now, and he says ESU is soft now. They don't do the burrito anymore, which is the mesh blanket. They did label it burrito, but and the reason they didn't, it was a big argument because of the level of force that they were saying that it was. They were calling it like a level 2 or a level 1, and it's not the ESU guys that were soft. What it was is the job screwed up. Okay, because when you start putting non-lethal restraining devices like that in a level of force, and a police officer, let's say an ESU guy, and for the most part, let's say in Queens where truck 9 is, or truck 10 where there's a lot of EDP jobs, as opposed to truck 1, even truck 2 has a lot of EDP jobs. If I'm the guy that's always going out there and using the burrito or the mesh restraining device, I'm getting the force reports. And then what happens when I get a lot of force reports? I go on monitoring, and then I'm brought up at the force stat meeting as what's going on with Lukash. He has all these force reports and has to be explained. Then we know what their answer was. Well, don't have him use the mesh blanket. Have somebody else, which is stupid. It should have never been put in there. So you could say maybe some of the ESU guys are soft, but they're protecting themselves because of the stupid asinine things that the job put in place, with the force reports, and that was one of them. So that's my defense to ESU. That I doubt they are soft. They're drummed down because of stupid procedures that criticize. It's just like getting CCRBs, right? How many after a certain amount of CCRBs you put on monitoring? You know what? They should evaluate what the force reports are. They should evaluate what the CCRBs are, and then decide whether the person needs monitoring, not just somebody that they just because they did something or they got a complaint. Because we know there's frivolous complaints, and we know that the mesh blanket protects the cops and protects the EDP or perpetrator as well. So that's my rant. Sorry.
Listen, like you said, go back. They had a long episode today. Watch John, Eric, and Marlon. They broke it down. They went pretty deep. We just wanted to give you our executive perspective on this, and let you know pretty much where we're guided from as to what we're looking at. We're looking at the overall picture. We're looking at they put him in the recovery position. He continued to resist, but there was no excessive force used. They were speaking to him calmly to de-escalate. They gently lifted his head to put the mesh hood on. They stopped him from banging his head. We talk about the force continuum, right? So they escalated the force to where it needed to be. They got him into handcuffs. They got him down onto the ground. We don't know in what order because it's only a snippet of the video, right? But obviously, they probably didn't get him into cuffs easily. So they had him. They were trying to control him on the ground while they waited for ESU and EMS to come and take him. And that's when he attempted to assault, if not assault, that one officer. So the force continuum continues, handcuffs or not. as we showed you, the big unless, right? The big unless. So force, whether it's the level 1 investigation or level 2 investigation, I guess technically it probably is a level 1. You know, that they're making an issue that the Southern District of New York should be looking at them, and they should be this cop should be arrested and terminated. Literally, he said that. Eric Sanders said that this officer should be arrested and terminated, should be processed for termination. When this is literally at such a low level that it's a level 1, it's supposed to be investigated technically, as Rob said, by the sergeant or the lieutenant, the immediate supervisor, unless otherwise directed by IAB. Is it a CCRB? Who knows? Does CCRB make it a self-generated? Who knows? Does somebody with the video make a CCRB? Who knows? They deal with that when that comes up. But the technicality of the NYPD policy and procedure in the New York State criminal procedure law and penal law in the use of force says that this officer was completely justified in what he did. Final words on that, Rob?
I agree.
You know, it just, you know, it's. I was very taken aback by the whole thread, to be honest. You know, I don't know how it got so taken so far left on this, you know. It scares me.
Mhm.
All right.
That's Joe Mango's funny. Eric Sanders at NIM. That's good, Joe.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. We're 2:42 in. Let's jump into Asking Executive.
Okay.
You know, because we're running late. We didn't want.
Oh yeah. Wow. Okay.
Another day we said we weren't going to do more than 2 hours, right?
I know.
So let's jump into Asking Executive. This is where you get to ask Ron and Rob. We answer questions from the chat. If you have any questions on topic, off topic, put them in the chat now. I don't think there was any during the show that we didn't address, but this is where you get an opportunity to ask a retired inspector, retired chief. You have access to us to ask us any questions that you don't normally have access to. And if you don't want to ask us live on the air in the chat because you're an active member of the service, it's completely understandable, or you don't want to just ask, you could always DM us. Our DMs are open at Exec Perspective on X. That's at Exec Perspective on X. It's on the banner on the bottom there. Or you can email a question anytime during the week, after the show, during the show. We're not going to answer it because we're not monitoring it. It's not monitored 24 hours a day, but we do check it pretty much every day, right? Send that question to theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com. We will get back to you. We will answer your question. If we don't think the question is appropriate for the show itself, we will still answer your question and get back to you, as long as it's not nonsense. We get some nonsense sometimes. All right. So do we have anything? Yankee games on Netflix. Don't worry.
Eric Carrara, 1948, asked the question.
1948. Oh, you're going to pass over one battle after another? He wants to know how big my piece of deal is.
I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't sure we should broach that subject.
We're not going to broach it, but it just shows you, where his mind's at. Terry, are you praying for my piece of deal?
Oh my
God!
God!
I think you're praying. No. Lily, let's just bring up Lily's comment. Thank you, Lily, for bringing this up and for memorializing this. It is our job to never forget. Detective Dilla, today is his 2-year anniversary since he was shot and killed in the 101 precinct on the car stop as part of John Shell's team. And that trial is going on as we speak. So yes, rest in peace. So Tom, I know that's what Terry, rather, I know that's what you're praying for, not my piece of deal. Eric Cora, which one were you saying? Well, I got
Yeah,
another.
yep, yep.
Thoughts on where the NYP and the NYC will be in a few years from now? Well, hopefully in 3 years and 8 months, we're with a new mayor. Because I don't think no matter what happens, no matter how socialist the city becomes in the next 3 years, 3.5 years, I don't think that Governor Hochul, who will probably win re-election, is going to remove him from office. So
Yeah, I just hope that the NYPD is pretty resilient, and I think whatever happens, there's always the capability to coming back. You talk about the layoffs in the '70s. You talk about other things that have happened. You look at the summer of love. The things that have happened, but does it have to hit rock bottom? I think it's going to hit rock bottom personally, and then I think it'll make a comeback. So I see you like TC's question, huh?
yeah, listen, it is. It's going to, like I said earlier, it's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately, and I'm here to live through it. So it's terrible. Yeah, TC, good to see you, pal. Here's a question: should 3511 College be an EPD? Asking for a podcaster. Is it still? I thought they did away with that.
I don't know, but
wait, let me look.
I don't think it should be. I don't care if it's 10.
I ain't got none up there. That's the Honor Legion. That's for a commendation. Oh no, I ain't got none up there.
Oh, but do you have duplicates of the one that you have up there?
No.
You can photostat a copy of them. Just
put it in a little blue paper frame.
Change the color. You can take them APD and make it a meritorious. Put a little star in it, make a commendation. There's all little tricks.
Syed Ali is asking, best route to get on track for a detective shield. We want to be sarcastic, we'll say driver chief. But in the reality, I had to do it. The best route, listen, it always was, you're in command, go to conditions, go to anti-crime, go up to the squad. You do you. Don't worry about the nepotism, the cronyism. Don't let it jade you. You do you. If you want to be proactive and be out there and you want to stand above others when you're sitting at the table for an interview, you do you. And you be as proactive and involved and understand your crime stats, understand your crime trends in your command, address them properly, and then put in for the detective shield, the detective squads. Don't be afraid to go up. Listen, the detective squad's not off limits. It doesn't say no trespassing, right? There's no reason why a uniformed cop can't stop into the squad and have a conversation and have a relationship with the detectives and the detective squad supervisors. And believe me, they appreciate that. Picking up a perk for them without trying to steal the collar. If you see somebody out there and hey, Rob, I got Ron that you were looking for. Drop them off, whatever the case may be. That goes a long way. Because believe me, the squad supervisors do have a say in who they pick up in their squad. They can, not always, but they can have influence because when you go for those interviews, they're borough specific. When you go for an interview with the detective squad, you go to that detective borough. And so the sergeant may be on that interview board, or the sergeant knows you're going and makes a phone call for you, right? Like I've said many times, and I quote Joe Fox, it's not always who you know on this job, it's who knows you that may advance your career.
Yeah, and I'll say that we are going to go to an interview for a squad or whatever. You're going to have to defend your history in the NYPD. So your collars, your arrests, your activity, people see that, and they see that, like you said, whether you're a motivated worker, okay, like Ron said, go up to the squad. I can't tell you how many times I could go up to the squad and say, hey, do you guys have any open cases or named perpetrators that you're looking to clear? And by they loved you because they were like, oh, you mean you can make this arrest for us and we can clear the case? Absolutely. Here's the name of the guy, wanted for a felony assault of his wife. Da, da, da. This is his last known address. They'll give you that information and they'll appreciate the work that you do for them. And yes, once they know that you're a hard worker and you're willing to step up a little bit, then they will go to bat for you. So the other route is, if you're capable and you think you're physically capable of it. No, I wouldn't say that. I was
What?
going to say go to ESU, Emergency Service Unit, right? Everybody after 2 to 3 years gets a detective specialist shield. So there's other routes too. Taru also gets shield, but those shields come less likely as getting into squad. You go to a squad or to narcotics, you're going to guarantee in 18 months. Other times it takes a little longer.
And even in the precinct, sometimes domestic violence gets it, but domestic violence is their own unit now. I'm sorry. Domestic violence it falls under the Detective Bureau. So now they're guaranteed to. Thank God, it's so overdue that domestic violence is on an investigative track. But they're on the investigative track now. They're part of the Detective Bureau. But the Field Intelligence Office, the FIO assistants, they get detective shields, specialist shields sometimes, and they also get pulled into the intel division where you'd be quicker to get a shield. So Del Rey jumping in at the end as always with a decent question. So what's your perspective on those self-inspection reports sergeants and lieutenants have to fill out? Are they a waste of time or maintain compliance and accountability? Do COs really look at or care about them? I'm going to tell you that I took them seriously. And those self-inspection reports actually get evaluated by the Quality Assurance Division. So if they look at the same information that the sergeant or lieutenant is listing as having evaluated and finds discrepancies, you get gigged on it. You fail the report. And it's like, how, if you're looking at the same material, are you coming up with complete opposite findings? Now, there is some things. So there's nothing wrong, and quality assurance used to tell you, there's nothing wrong for you to mark down needs improvement on that self-inspection report if you find something's wrong. But do something about it. Put in a recommendation. Talk to the next level supervisor. So if you're a sergeant, talk to the lieutenant that's got to sign off on it. If you're a lieutenant, talk to the XO who's got to sign off on it. If you're the XO, talk to the CO. And come up with a plan as to, listen, why is this messed up? Let's fix it. Let's fix it. So to me, personally, some people think they're BS, and some of them are BS because they're just minutia. But it does help you maintain compliance if they're done properly. Like so many other things on this job, if they're not just fluffed off to do them, then they are effective in helping you. Because I'm the CO, right? I can't watch every little thing. So I have to delegate things. So I need people, if they do their job properly, if everybody does their job properly, everybody's job is a lot easier. It's when everybody tries to do a little bit of everybody else's job. That's when it used to drive me crazy. Like, why are you doing this? That's his job. That falls under them. Let them do it. So when you're doing these self-inspections, if you do them properly and you give a legitimate response, if something's up, put down there that what you found wrong. Because when they get pulled by quality assurance and they look at it, it's so quick. It's so obvious when the sergeant really just did nothing about it. But as the boss, you also have to give the supervisor appropriate administrative time to do it properly. You can't have them covering patrol and getting the evaluation done. You have to give them time to do it properly.
So do I think the reports are necessary? Yes, because what they can show is you get an early evaluation of something that might not be being done correctly. Do I think that they should give it to the sergeants and lieutenants on patrol? Absolutely, unequivocally, no. You have a admin lieutenant, you have an admin sergeant who sit up in their office with their coffee cups and their feet up and their little army of soldiers that sit around them and all, watch, whatever show they watch on the TV. And you have to do, I'm thumbing through the patrol, I'm not patrol guy, I'm thumbing through the command log to make sure that there was appropriate entries. That's something that they should be doing, because you're right. I didn't always get the time, and it would take me off of patrol because I had to do this evaluation. But like you said, if you do have to do it, unequivocally have an answer and a response to any violations that you found. Okay, and what's the plan to stop it? Because quality assurance is going to come in there and say, oh, you identified the problem, what did you do to correct it? So you need to definitely do that. But I hated them. I did them. I thought they sucked. I really angry when I had to do them, because I said, what's the administrative staff doing in this command that I got to go look through the patrol guide on a late tour when I should be out on the streets and make sure that the cells were checked every night, or there was a station house security was done at the beginning and midway through the tour. I mean, that's something that easily somebody else could have done. So that's just how I feel about it. But I think the answer is to get somebody else. Let the people that are administrative in the command, let them do it, and leave me to my patrol job. I didn't ask for an admin job. So that's my rant.
No, listen, I agree. But like I said, well, there are some things that a patrol supervisor, there are some that are patrol related that should be done by patrol supervisors. But again, you have to give them administrative time. And that's where I found a problem, where I would say, hey, the training sergeant, you're supposed to do a certain percentage of your tour on patrol, right? So you do patrol while he does or she does their evaluation. And I just tell the lieutenants, Lou, you got to give them the opportunity. When you have that extra boss, doesn't mean you hang out in the lounge all night. Give that boss an admin night. You cover the desk, have somebody do patrol, or vice versa.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't mean you have the night off. Let them do what needs to be done. Gotcha, Tommy. So you can do it.
Detective Nolan mentions that he goes, Rob, this was at 1950 when I was, I was a test subject for the mesh blanket used by ESU, and this was back in the 1970s. My grandfather's company designed. I thought they were great. There was the mesh blanket was perfect. They had I think they adjusted it a little bit because they put a breathing area and stuff, because there was some stuff with restriction of breathing and stuff. But oh my God, I can't tell you how, and it calmed everybody down. The only problem that we did have is when they started with the K2 and there was an overheating of the body as a result of taking K2. You could cause somebody's death by putting in the mesh blanket, because it restricted the heat that was coming off the person's body. That's why you often see the people on K2, they'll literally take off all their clothes and stand there because of the reaction. And really, the only thing we used to do with them was we used to hold all their extremities out and wait for the paramedics, the advanced life support, and they would give them something to calm their nerves and stuff. So, but yeah, no, they're a great tool, Detective Nolan, and I'm sure your grandfather did great work with that. So thank you.
You got anything else? You see anything else out there?
No.
Lily
asked about EPD and then which is the difference. So, but I think Sleepy Joe answered it, and Detective Nolan answered it. So,
all right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Always appreciate the input. Always appreciate the questions. We have no problem answering the questions, so we really appreciate that. Any closing thoughts before I get to the shows?
No, just somebody new to I think the chat is Cosmic Moon Envy. Just maybe the last question we can do real quick. If an officer is off duty and stops an attempted murder and catches the person, do they get a shield or just a medal? I would say they're just going to get a medal. Now, if they put in for it, unfortunately, you got to put for it, unless
Maybe
it's something that, unless it's
maybe-
somebody that was, wanted for a serial crime or something else that really solved anything. I don't see them getting a gold shield for that.
yeah, they may get indicted. No, but yeah, listen, it happens. I've talked about it on the show, but it was back in the 90s. I was off duty and at a movie theater, and somebody was getting stabbed in the chest, and I stopped it, and I chased him down. I didn't shoot him because of the crowd. And I had a little 2-inch snub nose revolver, and was able to stop him from the assault, chased him down, caught him, got injured, messed up my knee a little bit, and I got a medal. Got a line of duty
Yeah.
time, got some audio grand juries out on Staten Island, which back then were nice. If you lived on Staten Island, they're like, just we'll call you if we need you to come in. And you audio. It was nice. But yeah, I mean, could you get a shield? You can get a shield from anything, You know who needs a shield? Officer Polgarin. Officer Polgarin needs to be at the podium for the next promotions.
He should have had one already. It should
Yeah,
have
he
been a
should've-
separate
he should've.
ceremony, and it should have been given to him that day. So
Yes, agreed. All right, so welcome to the chat. If it is Cosmic Moon, if you are new to the chat, welcome to the show. I hope to see you back. Get rid of this. And so on Friday, John, Eric, and Marlon will be back. They'll continue the conversation. There's so much going on in the news cycle that they'll get to that they didn't get to today. Plus whatever comes up, maybe on tomorrow's show. But so they'll be back on Friday, 08:05 for the roundtable. But it'll be Eric, John, and Marlon. They're going to have a special guest from the Key. George Misfoot's going to be there, right? From the Key, and then they're going to have their regular show and get into the latest. I'm anticipating 3.5, 4 hour show. Just my guess, because they didn't get to a lot today because of the show that they did on the video. So they'll be back, and then they'll be back again on Monday for their regular show. Monday, 08:05. So it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 08:05 for New York's Finest Pride and Unfiltered podcast. And then on Tuesday, again, we're going to say go back and watch last night's episode where they had former LAPD Chief of Detective Sean Malinowski, who's now working in the tech industry for AI-driven crime briefings to be given out, which is interesting. It's interesting to listen to. And also autonomous patrol vehicles like they're using down in Florida in a thing. So go back and check out that episode with Tom and Pete and Chief Malinowski. And next week, they have a former Brooklyn ADA, Anna Siga Nicolazzi. Hope I got that right. She's got 35 murder prosecutions under her belt. She's a Court TV contributor. She's got the AOM Anatomy of a Murder podcast with over 1 million downloads. And she's got a new podcast called Law and Order. It's on season 2. Season 1 is New York City organized crime, and season 2 is U.S. terror cases. So she will be on the show, a little bit of a different twist. She'll be on the show next week, next Tuesday at 7:05 p.m. Right here on the network. And then go ahead.
don't forget the super chat, right? We forgot him last time.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. All right. All right. So before
Sorry,
we go
I
back,
didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, that's fine. Want to thank 516 Diecast. If you're still here, present for duty, Chief Inspector, thank you for all you do. We believe, and we're pretty 99% convinced that 2 weeks ago, You also had a super chat. We forgot to read out the super chats at the end of the day. Thank you, Rob, for giving me the high sign. I'm glad I looked over and saw it. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the support. And thank you for the super chat 2 weeks ago. We reread all the super chats last week off the recorded episode, but yours was given prior to the episode's recording, so it wasn't there for me to copy. So I wasn't able to 100% tell it was from you. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. And then, but just before we go, I'm gonna just hit one personal thing, Rob.
Yep.
My kids from my first marriage, they're grown now. Their grandfather passed away. So I just want to pay a little tribute to Pat Cristo. He was a funny guy, a really old school. We talk about the Italians, making fun of the Italians earlier. Full Italian, straight through and through. He was a masonry, did masonry, was able to build schools, build churches, did a lot of stuff. Truly loved his family, adored his family, was so good to his family. So I just want to send my condolences out to his wife, Annette, his son, Nicky, who's a retired, Nicky Cristo, Housing for Life. I don't know if he's still around. He's an original housing cop, did 20 years on the job, was a narco ranger, and then went into the detective bureau and was part of the child abuse squad. He's now down in Florida, and he's the chief of the Palm Beach Police Department down in Florida now. So Nicky and his wife Lori, his other daughter Debbie, my kid's mom, my ex Diane, and his other daughter Dee Dee, and all the grandchildren from my family to you. Our thoughts and prayers are with you at this time. My daughter's down in Florida now. My son's going down with his mom for the arrangements at this weekend. So I just wanted to touch on that and pay a little respect to him. So thank you for that time.
I think one battle after another exemplifies probably what all of us are saying to ourselves right now. A lot of people don't keep in touch with the ex-parents, etc. This is special. Shows you're a good man, Ron, and I agree.
He was good. He was a good man. Just a quick funny aside. A couple of years ago, my son, he didn't drive, but so he finally started driving. Got him his first car, and he called me up. Ronnie boy, and that's just how he was. I want to thank you for taking care of my Nicky. It's like, Pat, he's my son, It's like, but he just looked out for him. Loved all his grandchildren, but loves my kids, and always looked out for them. And that's just the type of person he was. So thank you. One battle after another, but it's really. Just for the love of my kids, and Pat, rest in peace. So until next week, people, we'll see you next Wednesday at 5:05 p.m. Until then, be safe. Thank you.